Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 6th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. Just as a refresher, we take turns where the Deputy Mayors chair the Committee of the Whole, so that is why you get to see me front and center today. So first thing on our agenda, of course, is the calling the meeting to the order, which we did at 6 o'clock. I forgot to bang the gavel, but I'm sure we'll live. So the adoption of the agenda, we are looking for an amendment to the agenda. We are looking to add an in-camera item, so an addition of 6B to your agenda, please, and that as an in-camera as per section 24(1)D. And then we are also looking to amend the agenda to defer item 5E to the next Committee of the Whole meeting, as some attachments were missed, and administration wants to give council time to review those. So if I could get a motion on the floor to adopt the agenda as amended. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, I'll move the agenda as amended.
Excellent. All in favor? It's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, and now we're just looking to adopt the previous minutes. So we're looking to accept the minutes of the April 15th Committee of the Whole minutes. Councillor Flowers.
I will move to accept the minutes of April 15th Cal meeting.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I appreciate my colleagues moving so swiftly on this. We have a heavy agenda tonight, so we're trying to be as efficient as possible. Oh yes, all in favor, thank you. All in favor, passed unanimously, thank you. All right, moving along to delegations. Correct? All right, great. Delegations. So we would like to call up Lynn Noble, the program coordinator, and Renata Bartlett of the Seniors for Kids Society.
Hello, everyone. We're so happy to be here. Thank you for having us.
Welcome.
I am Lynn Noble, the program coordinator of Seniors for Kids Society, Cochrane and area. Joining me is Renata Bartlett from our board of directors. And today we are pleased to be sharing the Seniors for Kids Society grandparent story. We are very proud to be a Cochrane grassroots organization that began 26 years ago here in Cochrane. So here's our story. Seniors for Kids is a school-based intergenerational mentorship program. Our mandate is to meet the needs of students that do not have grandparents in the area. Senior volunteers volunteer once a week to meet with students one-on-one in an organized, facilitated, school-based program. Bridging the two generations, our volunteers become school grandparents and have a set day and time to share their wisdom and talents with our students. Everyone benefits: students, seniors, and our community.
I believe the connection with a child or with a youth, it depends upon the age level, is crucial to both their development but also mine. In fact, I think I learn as much as they do.
In grandparent program, we go into the library and there's like board games supplied. Sometimes there's a special activity. The person I'm paired up with is named Laureen, and she is very nice and very creative. She listens very well, and we always end up chatting a long time. Like usually we tend to like talk over the time limit, just sharing stories.
The impact for them would obviously be that they realize that they're being listened to and that they're being heard, and therefore they must be valuable. And all I want them to understand is that they, first of all, care and are cared for, and secondly, have something valuable to contribute to the community.
Thanks for joining us today at Seniors for Kids Grandparent Program. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to learn more, go to seniorsforkids.ca.
I'd also like to mention Nadine that you just saw in the video is here with us. Nadine, give a wave. Great, thanks for coming out. Good. Okay, here is our vision, mission, and mandate. We did a strategic planning event here recently with Mr. Glenn Sine in February, and so we are working on some updates of our wonderful program. So our vision, children and seniors are empowered to be active, empathetic community members, supporting engagement and trust between generations. Our mission is to cultivate the social well-being of children and seniors through fostering intergenerational relationships. Sorry, there's a typo there. Our mandate is to meet the needs of students who do not have grandparents in the area, to allow students to spend quality time with senior volunteers within a school environment, thus bridging the gap between the two generations. Our beginnings, Seniors for Kids Society grandparent beginnings. We began in Holy Spirit Elementary School in 1997. We had 3 volunteers. We had one founding volunteer who was just retired from our school program in 2023 after 26 years with Seniors for Kids. Her name was Pauline. She's in the photo there, and she stepped down due to health reasons. In May of 2018, we celebrated our 20th anniversary celebration at Holy Spirit School. And how we came about was a lady by the name of Selena Lydick was transferred to Cochrane. Her husband had a job transfer, and they came up from the United States. Within a short time, they were really missing family connections. And she went into St. Mary's Catholic Church and spoke to some of the seniors there and said, listen, would you consider coming down to Holy Spirit to meet with some of the students that are missing their grandparents or don't have grandparents in the area? And she brought 3 volunteers down, and all 3 have been with us for over 18 years. Where are we now? We're so proud of this. We run 14 weekly programs, Cochrane and area. Elementary, middle, and high school programs. K to 6, we have 82 students. In 7 to 8, we have 32 students, and 9 through 12, we have 13. We also have student volunteer opportunities. We run over 100 intergenerational matches each week. We have over 50 senior volunteers that are with us every week. We have 4 amazing staff. Thank you, Renita. And we typically reach over 7,168 volunteer hours each year in the community, and we're very proud of that. Our senior group photos. One thing I do want to mention is Seniors for Kids Society is honored to have been selected as a 2014 Volunteer Group of the Year. And we were again nominated for the 2021 Volunteer Group of the Year at the Cochrane Community Awards. Volunteer appreciation is an important part of our program. We offer regular senior coffee socials with special guest speakers and throughout the school year. And we also have 2 volunteer appreciation dinners. One is in December and one is in June. We try and take a group photo every June. Here's 3, but we've taken many of them. And many of our seniors have developed relationships outside of our program volunteer times. This limits social isolation and improving mental health of our seniors. Our volunteer and staff retention, minimum, we have, most seniors have been with us 15 years plus. We are an inclusive organization and welcome seniors, board members, and students from all backgrounds to join our program. A couple of our programs. Our partner programs, I started this a few years ago. Seniors on the Bow was the first pilot program that I started. It was over 10 years ago. And we have St. Timothy High School students that volunteer with us every week to come down to Seniors on the Bow. Therein also Bethany Care Center. We have Mitford Middle School students who join us weekly at Bethany Care Center. and very proud of this new initiative that was started this year. That's with Big Hill Lodge and Cochrane Christian Leadership students who come down weekly to the lodge to volunteer through our programs. Okay, and yes, thank you. Seniors for Kids Society, here's our contact information. We're very passionate about what we do. We're very proud of what we do and how we contribute to our community.
Well, thank you, ladies, very much for your presentation. I'm very proud of the work you do for our community, and it's amazing to see the number of hours that kids are interacting with seniors. So I will turn it over to my colleagues for questions.
Okay.
Councillor Fedeco, starting with you.
Thank you. I don't have any questions for you guys. Just for transparency reasons, I am on the board of Seniors for Kids, and the reason that I joined the board is because 2 of my kids out of 3 had grandparents through your program, and it was an amazing journey, especially for when they were younger and they probably needed a little bit of mentorship, and I'm so thankful that you're able to offer the services that you do. Obviously, there's no monetary ask here, so, but I wanted to make it clear that I was a board member, but thank you for presenting the information. I think it's important, and from what I understand, and you can maybe correct me, you've never come before council to actually present information, or it's been years and years and years.
That's correct. It's my first time coming to present, so thank you for all being so kind.
Yeah, I think it's important just so that not only that we learn about what you offer, but the community at large, who, of course, thanks to our media friends, will probably pick it up and maybe do some information on what you can provide to our kids out there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Flowers.
I too don't have any questions because I know your program very well. I just wanted to thank you for the years of connections you've made in the community, and I've seen the seniors flourish from all their activities that you put on, the connections that they make, like you say, mental health prevention and connections and relationships, and the kids also benefit hugely. My mom was one of the volunteers for several years, and she got a lot out of the program. So thank you for all that you do, and keep up the great work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions from my colleagues, but yeah, so on behalf of council, thank you very much for all the great work you do. And I think maybe my only question is to clarify, your program runs through the school year?
Correct, yes. We are a school-based program, so we do run September through till June.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. And to be a senior, you have to be how old?
Pardon me?
Is 65 a senior, or are we?
We actually take members 50 and over, so I'm not qualified by quite a bit, but usually 55 or older. Anyone who's passionate that wants to volunteer with our program, I will definitely interview.
Excellent. I'm not even going to say my thoughts about some, but yes, anyhow, thank you very much for all the work you do, and yes, for anybody who's watching, if you'd like more information or to volunteer or participate, just visit the website, seniorsforkids.ca. So, thank you very much. Okay. All right, moving on then. Next up, we have the Cochrane Public Library. So we would like to call Monique. Monique, help me out. I've never had to say it in public. So Monique Fiedler-Sells, Director of the Cochrane Public.
It's a real mouthful.
Over to you.
So first off, thank you so much to Council and the administrative team for making time for us today, as well as being good partners in helping us provide Cochrane residents with top-notch services. We appreciate all the hard work and dedication you provide to our community. For those at home who might not know, I am joined by the Cochrane Public Library Board and staff. And my name is Monique Fiedler-Sells, and I'm the Library Director. We'd like to start off with a library update. Last year showcased record engagement. More people than ever in our community are accessing our resources, using computers, checking out books, attending programs with their families, taking exams, borrowing sewing machines, and we know our community will continue to flourish and value our services. Not only has Cochrane continued to grow, but we also attribute the huge surge in usage to going fee and fine free. As a result of this influx of new and returning patrons, we increased investment in our staff to maintain our service levels, and we're also able, for the first time in our history, to provide benefits to our full-time union staff members who work tirelessly for our organization, some for many years, and deserve equitable treatment. The heart of any service organization is the people that make it successful. Without fail, every year we run our patron satisfaction survey, and the one thing our patrons agree on is that we provide great customer service. And that is because our knowledgeable team genuinely cares about this community and our residents. So, from the board and staff, thank you for believing in the power of the library to enrich lives. We're here before you today because while that funding was welcome and crucial to our organization, we are still in need of additional support. During the budget process, we heard from council that you needed more information to make a decision regarding our appropriation request. So we will be using this time to expand on the 2 other items that were included in that request and remain unfunded: a full-time outreach services coordinator position and the facility needs assessment. Our library prides itself on data-driven decision-making, and to that end, we were fortunate to receive grant funding to ensure a community-led approach in developing our plan of service for the next 3 years. Several of you participated in this process, and we were thrilled with the engagement and feedback. Our community workshop session was particularly impactful, with representatives from dozens of community organizations sharing and collaborating on what we want to see in our community, what are the main challenges facing Cochrane, and ultimately, how can the public library address those challenges and achieve our vision for Cochrane? Of the 26 goals that we developed to achieve that communal vision outlined in the plan of service, 3 goals that emerged from the consultation included hiring an outreach services coordinator to deliver off-site programming for ages 0 to 18, securing funding for a facility needs assessment, and once that is complete, tackling the next crucial step of conducting the needs assessment and developing a preliminary design for a new facility. I'd like to speak to these goals, starting with the outreach services coordinator. This position is crucial to delivering on a number of plan of service priorities focusing on outreach. Outreach has become essential to maintaining service levels, as our facility is so drastically undersized that we cannot accommodate full use of the library during program delivery. Access to certain collections is unavailable due to our lack of program space. Participant numbers exceed our occupancy and are capped, and quiet space is not available due to open air programming. As a result, we need to look beyond the walls of our facility and collaborate more than ever with our local partners, extending library services while supporting partner goals and initiatives. Additionally, this position aligns with Town of Cochrane's strategic priorities such as open space in natural areas, and particularly connectivity. All these annual goals you see listed help create community, as well as forge a connection with the library, which is more important than ever. The 2023 report, The Case for Literacy in Alberta, discovered 45% of working-age Albertans do not have the literacy skills required to perform most jobs in today's economy reliably and consistently. Workers with low literacy levels, on average, work less productively, increase the need for do-overs, are involved in more workplace accidents, have poorer health, are more likely to be absent, and are less adaptable to change. As you all may know, Canada is in a productivity crisis. It's fallen over the past 13 quarters to where it was in 2016. Literacy is a key factor. The solution? The most effective and efficient way to reduce the costs of low literacy, both in dollars and human costs, are to provide literacy materials and supports early in the lives of children, which is what this outreach services coordinator position aims to do. As literacy experts, the library is uniquely positioned to meet this need. But we are understaffed. There is direction from municipal affairs about the recommended staffing for a library of our size. The provincial government breaks it down between essential enhanced, and excellent, which is exactly what it sounds like. We are currently at 14.5 full-time equivalent FTE. The very minimum recommendation for our population from 3 years ago is 16.1. That is the baseline to maintain the service levels for our population, and we are not meeting it. We are sorely behind and not keeping pace with other communities. We have an exceptional staff team, and they are trying their best to offer the same level and quality of service, but with the growth we are experiencing, it is just not feasible. On a previous slide, we already looked at the increase in usage from 2022 to 2023, and I can tell you we just ran the numbers, and from January to April of this year, our program participation has gone up 40% in the same time frame as last year. It is clear that our space is not suited to our needs, and we can't solve this overnight, but we do have a solution to help alleviate our increasingly cramped facility. We're going into the community to champion literacy. With our new vehicle, made possible through the generosity of Cochrane Toyota, everything we need to deliver on our outreach goals is in place. Without this position, we lose out on an amazing asset that has been provided to the library free of cost. This position, paired with the RAV, will contribute directly to enhanced service levels for the community, increased free programming opportunities for children and families, with a particular focus on connecting with and supporting schools and child care centers, such as the BGC, Cochrane, and their new clubhouse location. We have numerous requests from preschools and schools for additional support, but we are at capacity. We cannot keep pace with the demand. When we start accommodating more tours or presentation requests, that means reducing our number of on-site programs because we're already operating below necessary staffing levels. We can't do both. There are very few organizations that provide free programs for all ages in our community. Those who can afford additional learning opportunities for their children will be able to provide those supports. Reducing programs will disproportionately impact struggling families in Cochrane, and the gap between children of families who have financial means and those who do not will continue to grow. The Outreach Services Coordinator delivers on community needs, aligns with town priorities, meets the most basic staffing requirement, and provides critical supports to other child care centers and schools. Our library is committed to helping children and adults develop the literacy skills they need to survive and thrive. By virtue of being a space that welcomes all, we are in the position to see and serve this need. As with most of our initiatives, we applied for grant funding to support this position. While we have been successful in raising over $30,000 in grants, donations, and sponsorships so far this year to support operations, we were not successful with the Community Initiatives Program grant. The cost for this position for 2024 to start in September is $24,000. The cost the following year is $76,000. Now for the facility needs assessment. You've seen this chart before. I don't think there's anyone here that does not recognize the need for a solution to our space problem. We are too small, and it is impacting the quality of service we are able to provide to the community. We have no dedicated program space. While program attendance grew to over 17,000 program participants last year through a combination of ingenuity and sheer force of will, we are either capping programs or turning people away. The problem will only grow with the biggest impacts to early literacy and school readiness. Our collection is half the size it should be. We have 8,000 more people in our community than Fort Saskatchewan, but they have a collection of almost double our size. Our patrons are growing frustrated by the lack of books. It is by far the #1 concern in our satisfaction survey every year. Also, we have incredibly cramped staff workspaces, with roughly 15 members of staff working out of a space of 840 square feet. That's about 5 parking stalls. What they accomplish in that space is nothing short of a miracle, but we're running out of ideas for how to improve the efficiency and workflow of that area, and it's impacting our most basic service levels: checking in books, processing new materials, and customer service support. Lastly, Cochrane has grown exponentially since our building was first constructed in 2000 with a population of 11,000 people. We are now experiencing the challenges that come with a city-sized population. We phoned 911 a total of 25 times last year. That's an increase of 150% from the previous year. We have a capable staff team, but that is an incredible amount of stress, and it impacts our ability to retain and recruit staff. It is also very alarming for patrons to go on an outing with their children to the library and encounter these types of incidents, many of which can be quite traumatic. For those directly involved in an incident, our space is so small that our ability to provide a patron with some privacy and dignity while they navigate potentially one of the worst days of their life is extremely limited. There are features you can add to new library builds that help increase the safety of your facility. We do not have those features. What we do have are leaks in the roof and a perpetual bin at the front door to catch the water. Our space is becoming less safe, less comfortable, and more difficult to keep clean. It is no longer just a matter of needing more space. Our ability to provide a safe and welcoming experience for our patrons is hampered by our facility. But thankfully, despite all of this, the library board has a plan. We are ready to address this and undertake the next step of a facility needs assessment. We will get the hard work with your support. This is a one-time expense to help us determine what the community needs from a new library facility, the condition of our facility, and possible design requirements for a new build. It's an estimated $57,000 to conduct this assessment, and we have applied for the Community Facility Enhancement Program to cover half the cost, which we will know in July, but the funding needs to be secured prior to the end of the year. Should we be successful with our CFAP application, we would be seeking additional funds of $53,000 before the end of the year. If we are not successful, the total cost would be $81,000. Our 2025 budget request will include the ongoing Outreach Services Coordinator position, along with requests necessary to maintain service levels. We've spent a significant amount of time discussing what has not been working, but we want to take a moment and pause about what this could be. The mayor spoke at the State of the Town about the strategic planning sessions undertaken by council and administration that calculated the upcoming capital costs of everything Cochrane wants and needs over the next 10 years, with the total amounting to almost $1 billion. That's incredible. We acknowledge how difficult it must be to look over all the needs in our community and determine what gets prioritized. What we want you to consider is the potential of the library as a partnered facility. We are the untapped asset for social infrastructure. With increased investment and strategically leveraging our potential, we can have a massive impact on social cohesion, economic well-being, and community resilience. Our most compelling feature is our accessibility. The library is open 7 days a week, till 8 p.m. from Monday to Thursday, and all the weekends for a total of 61 hours per week. That kind of access is substantive. Not to mention, we are completely free. You can spend your entire day, every day, in the library, using our computers, reading books, attending programs, and it won't cost a cent. We are committed to inclusivity and making every person that walks through our door feel welcome. We are also highly visible. Every single new person in our community may not know what Cochrane resources are available, but they do know there is a library and that we are here to help. It is because of how accessible, visible, and trusted we are that with the right investment, we can become the gathering space in town. And given how many people we can attract to our space, just by virtue of the wide range of free services we offer, we can engage in innovative partnerships that provide unprecedented access to community partners and resources. This vision goes well beyond becoming just a partnered facility. If we explore the possibilities of what it means to be a truly public facility, what outreach services could be operating out of the library space? Consider Calgary Public Library's Wellness Desk Initiative, where they provide access to free mental health and addiction support and health information. With space, we could have outreach workers from Cochrane Addictions and Mental Health, an FCSS community resource worker, Alberta Health Services, rotating in and out of a community health space. Consider Edmonton Public Library's Settlement Services Workers Initiative. We could have a presence from the Cochrane Immigrant Services Committee or someone from Rocky View Immigration Services. Consider the Welcoming Center at the Okotoks Public Library. Staff from 1 to 5 every day and acts as an accessible venue for anybody with questions about the town, whether they have lived in Okotoks for a while or they're new to the area. Consider Halifax Public Library, offering one-on-one consultations for entrepreneurs with in-person sessions tailored to a specific business idea. Why not partner with Prospect Employment Services to assist job seekers? We can support health, knowledge, diversity, culture, and the local economy, not by becoming experts overnight, but by providing the space to access that expertise in one location. In this vision, we work closely and collaboratively with service providers from other public agencies, hosting a range of services on site. Service coordination and cross-referrals become standard. Libraries have evolved into highly capable partners in supporting the common good, and while we are working on fostering literacy, with our partners, we are reducing disparity in our community, we are crafting belonging, we are the space for connectivity. As the heart of our community, we provide the primary public infrastructure available 7 days a week and free to all. We know with increased investment for the Outreach Services Coordinator position and the Facility Needs Assessment, we can make meaningful and impactful change in our community. We will do the work, but we need your help. We are poised to embark on the Facility Needs Assessment in 2025, the 75th year anniversary of the library. It was on November 24th, 1950, that the Cochrane Association Public Library first opened in a little basement room of the community hall with no windows. We have come so far since then, and we believe there is no better way to celebrate the past 75 years of serving our community than by charting a course for the future. We're thankful for this opportunity and grateful for your time, and I'd love to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your presentation. I really appreciate it. And I think Cochrane as a community is really fortunate to have your passionate leadership on the library front. So starting off with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues for questions. Councillor Wilson, over to you.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Monique. And thank you for inviting me into your board as of last, I guess late last year. You have a really great group of volunteers behind you on the board. Just great that they could all show up and be here tonight. I had a few rapid fire questions for you on the outreach coordinator position that we're talking about, and then one on the facility needs. So outreach coordinator, it sounds like we currently have a donation vehicle, thankfully from Cochrane Toyota, thanks to them is it sitting idle currently without the coordinator position?
We're currently still using it. So anytime that a staff member has to go to sort of an outreach event in the community, we're using that vehicle. But it could be utilized far more than it is currently.
Thank you. Could you talk a little bit more about what the OC will actually do? And specifically, I was interested what they'd be involved with Cochrane schools. Is it all Cochrane schools? What will they be doing if this is approved?
Yeah, so the Outreach Services Coordinator, that position, it's fairly standard for libraries to have really good relationships with their local schools. And we love our local schools, but we certainly can't support them to the degree that they should be. So normally you would have every class coming in to have a tour of the library. So you're making sure to extend that literacy education outside of the school and into the community. You would be going and visiting your schools and doing presentations. Right now we currently do that to a small degree for our summer reading club, but nothing else. For your preschools, you would be going out to your preschools, many of whom can't get to the library, to make sure to start fostering that connection early. So you'd be going out to preschools within the community. And then for things like, BGC, the clubhouse location, one of the things we originally had spoken about with them is that we would love to be able to support them in that location particularly, just to make sure that there is more off-site opportunities for library engagement with that space and those kids. They have a huge number of children going through those programs, and we just think there's just so much opportunity to, again, keep that literacy piece alive and exciting. And again, schools do a great job there, but extending that to home, that's where the library should be picking up some of the weight. And currently, we're just not able to do so.
Okay, thank you. Two tougher questions. This is one we've been asking more and more of administration, and that's, are there any metrics or KPIs that can help us determine the success of the OC year over year? How will we know if this is a successful initiative? If we
Absolutely. So we look at a lot of numbers. So definitely our stories are impactful, anecdotes are impactful, but we look at how many people we're impacting. So you'll see that in the plan of service, in each year of the plan of service, we want a 10% increase in our outreach activities. Mm-hmm. We want an increase to our teen programming. We're going to be looking to that, as well as just making sure that we're having that impact and getting out to the schools. And you'll see that reflected in very specific metrics.
Okay, thank you. Does the OC count towards the library staff number currently at 14.5, or is this a separate?
It does not.
Entity? Okay.
So it brings us to 15.5.
Gotcha. Okay. And then finally, facility needs assessments. I know I've questioned administration, haven't got an answer back about can the actual facility needs assessment be funded through our CRL reserve and its restrictions? I haven't got that answer back, but I did hear tonight that even if the answer is no, there's a possibility of a grant paying for a third of it, it looked like, if I understand that correctly.
The Community Facility Enhancement Program, the CFEP, that would be matching funds, so that would be up to 50%.
Thank you, okay.
Yeah.
And then just finally, this was news to me, a facility needs assessment. Why is that critical? There's funding consequences with it. Obviously, you can't fund something that you haven't made a plan for. Is that the main reason we need to get on it now? Absolutely.
If we were just like to go out to the community and start a capital campaign without a plan, we don't know what people want from the library. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to serve. You know, like the library should be built on the dreams of the people. Every time, guys. The library should be built on the dreams of the people of Cochrane and what they want from the facility. So sometimes that might mean more dedicated program space. Sometimes that might mean more rooms for community groups. We know they'll want rooms for community groups. You know, so that is a key piece of that. And it's also going to be assessing some of those other needs that you're also looking at, like what is it that people are wanting that is just missing from Cochrane? We've talked a lot about the arts. Like, is there something where it makes sense for the library to partner in a way that provides us savings, but gets us where we need to be?
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here today. One final question, either to the presenter or probably administration, is that I know it's a committee of the whole meeting. If there's an ask for an in-year funding addition, which I think this is for an OC outreach coordinator, what are next steps for council? I don't understand how that looks within a current year.
Yeah, thank you through the chair to Councillor Wilson. We can certainly bring that back administratively for a formal consideration.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Reid.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. For me, you answered a number of questions that kind of hung over from last year's budget process, so I'm grateful for that. Councillor Wilson asked a question about the ROI on the outreach coordinator, and I understood that answer. In terms of the facility, you talked a lot in your presentation about partnerships. I was wondering, and I recognize that in some of the like institution or like communities you selected, that there is actually a joint use facilities, for example, Okotoks, right? Have you thought about, rather than kind of venturing out and looking at building your own building, have you thought about perhaps partnering with some other group, even a corporate group like Garmin or something like that? I mean, there are so many, I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but I would think that there's so many opportunities to do that type of a rather than just solely having a building dedicated to the library on its own. Have the group explored that opportunity?
Explored? No. Talked about extensively? Yes. Yeah, we are extremely open to a partnered facility, especially given all the constraints that Cochrane is dealing with. You have a lot on your plate. You know I'm your biggest fan to watch council and see everybody that's coming up in delegations. So for us, it makes a lot of sense to partner with another group. which is what the facility needs assessment will actually help us with. So they're going to kind of look at our community as well, see the needs, see what makes sense for the library to kind of start considering in terms of partnered facilities, especially in terms of cost savings for both the library board as well as the town. That's a really key piece for us. But yes, I think partnered facilities make so much sense for the future of libraries and where we're going as more community hubs. We're not quiet book repositories. That's the very last thing that we are anymore. So partnered makes sense. That's where I'd love to see us go.
Yeah, and I know you're a regular watcher of our council broadcasts. And you may notice at the last meeting, the mayor put forth a notice of motion and suggesting a joint use facility between a recreation and a high school, which I've seen in other communities, like in particular like Fort McMurray. So the idea of a joint use facility is appealing to me. I think it does two things. One is, in that particular case, for example, it says to Alberta Education that we're serious about a community combining our services together. And I think, and knowing the Fort McMurray story, I know it bumped them up on that list. And a joint use facility for the library, I think, in many ways would bump it up on anybody's list. So just putting it out there. But thank you again for your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Flowers.
Thank you for an awesome presentation. I just wanted to commend you on your positive energy and looking forward into the future with all the struggles that you've been experiencing. Your board and your staff are always so bubbly and easy to talk to and work with. I attended your open house last week and I heard all the numbers and I was amazed at what you guys can accomplish and add to your existing programs. I like the direction you're taking with partnering, with looking for grants, getting the needs assessment done and doing outreach. I think you're headed in a great direction. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Councillor Fideko.
Thanks for the information. Yeah, the stats of communities compared to what they have for square footage versus what we have is pretty alarming. But I think the biggest thing, can you, and I don't think you provided this, or could you provide it, like how many people are working for each one of these compare communities? Because I commend you for having 14.5 full-time people working to support our entire community, which is probably at 39,000 people right now. Do you know the information offhand, like how many FTEs are working for Fort Saskatchewan, Okotoks, or is it something that you could get back to council about?
I have the 2023, I don't have the 2024. But yes, so in terms of appropriation comparisons, in terms of FTEs, I do have that information. I can tell you we are lagging in terms of per capita. Something I wasn't going to bring up tonight. I was going to save for the 2025 budget request, but certainly I can make that information available.
Right, and the only reason that I bring that up is that, you can build a building as big as you want. It could be 50,000 square feet, but you got to have people to actually be there to run it. And so to me, it goes back to actually having the staff that I think needs to come down. It's not about partnerships or building, partners with, businesses or whatever, or other community groups. You have to have the people that are actually going to work there, and that needs to be looked at from the town perspective, I would imagine. Also, if you could tell me how, when you look at some of these square meters of buildings, how were they funded? Were they funded through the municipality? Were they funded through grants? Is it a combination? That might be, if you're going to get back to me about the actual employees, that might be something that you could also share my way as to how some of these builds actually came to be. Were they private partnerships? Were they town supported? But I think the biggest thing is about staffing. Mm-hmm. So thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Nagel.
Thanks for being here tonight. It's a pleasure to see you. I actually have questions about something you mentioned. Can you please further explain what it is you were, what all you have in mind when you mentioned victim services and addiction support services and stuff like that?
So that is just an imagine the possibilities scenario. But when you look at larger centers, you see basically what they'll, so for instance, I talked about specifically about Edmonton. So they have social workers as well as settlement services workers. And they come in, they have an allocated space within the library, and they offer those services. So at their central branch as well as some of their newcomer branches. They will work with offsite groups. They'll provide them with a desk, they'll provide them with space, and then they are offering those services out of the facility. And it just makes so much sense. So the one I talked about, the Calgary, the mental wellness desk, So they have like people from within the community that are offering those services. The librarians are not experts. They're working with partners. They're saying, this is your space. They come out with a partnership agreement, and then they have the outreach services offered off-site. It's actually part of our plan of service, and it's worded a little vaguely to allow some flexibility, but basically in the boardroom, we would be working with a partner to offer services from their organization out of that space, a certain number of hours per month. The vision is something like that, where it's like, okay, maybe it's a little difficult to get to this one area in our community where parking's poor, right? But it's maybe a senior population that is served. They might have fewer people that might take advantage of those services. If we were to offer something at the library out of that space consistently on like bi-weekly, monthly basis for people to know, like, this is when I come to the library, that makes so much sense, especially in the one piece, like, I want to really underscore, like, our hours are better than almost any public facility. Like, just very, very clearly, with the evenings as well as weekends, most public facilities just can't offer those kinds of hours. We do. So instead of another location staying open late one evening a week, you know, to try and get to people, why not come to the library instead? So you don't have to have two people staffing that location, because we're already there. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting idea. I know, like, when I've gone down to the Calgary Public Library, the new one that's been built, you often see people who have nowhere else to go and they're abusing substances at the library. I've heard that's a trend in other major cities, and obviously with our 25 911 calls you mentioned, it's something else we're seeing. So I think this idea of when people with substance abuse or homelessness issues show up at the library, rather than trying to figure out how to get rid of these people, we figure out how to help them at the same space. I think that's a very cool idea.
I love that. Yes, exactly. Right now, we're not addressing like the root of the problem. We're addressing it after the fact. You know, like the people that we're seeing in our library, they're really suffering. And to be able to have to phone 911 because there's no other option, it doesn't make sense for a lot of those scenarios.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nagel. Mayor Jung.
Yeah, thank you. Not a lot to add other than thanks. Also appreciate the volunteer board members that help support the library and make decisions on our behalf as a community. So thank you to all of them. Also appreciate the data. I think that was mentioned. I think I mentioned that to you after your open house the other night. It's one thing to make decisions here based on nice stories, which you've outlined, but also cold hard facts and data. So always appreciated. I too, and Councillor Nagel, I think really touched on it, what I was going to around the partnering in the facility. Love to hear more about that. I think that's likely our path forward in producing a new library space in the shorter term, is to partner somehow, and partnering with other like agencies or whatever, as explained. But the one thing I did want to, well, I had a question. You talked about untapped resource for social, and then
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure.
Sorry,
okay.
that's a very library term. We talk about social infrastructure. I'm going to give you an anecdote. So there's this really famous story in Chicago during the heat wave, and they were looking at, and people passed away. Hundreds of people passed away during this really terrible heat wave. And they were looking at these two neighborhoods that were both low-income neighborhoods, but far more people survived in this one. It was only like a handful of people that passed away, whereas this other hundreds. And they were trying to figure out what was the difference, why. And it was because one of those neighborhoods had libraries, community centers, barber shops. They had places for people to meet and connect. So people were connecting with their neighbors, because primarily it was senior populations that passed away in the heat wave that were isolated. So they had all of these areas where people in the neighborhood come together so they could support one another. And that was the distinction. So really powerful piece about that is social infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you for that. That really touched me, and I missed the last word. I just wrote down blank. But I appreciate that. And in a time when social needs and human connection is at an all-time high, really, really track with what you're saying there. So thank you for that. And the community hub, I mean, you don't have to convince me of the benefits of a great library. So thank you for that. I just wanted to touch back with administration on this is coming back, this item will be on a future council agenda, or do we have to action that? Similar to what Councillor Wilson was asking, but I just want to be sure that of how and when.
Thank you again through the chair to Mayor Jung. Administration will be happy to bring back a report. I don't think it will take very long. I couldn't tell you with any specificity as to when that would be, but happy to bring that in front of council for formal consideration.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for an exact date, just weeks, not months. Yeah, okay. Thank you, and thank you to your board and all the staff that are here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to our next item, 5A, Bylaw 21-2024, Subdivision and Development Appeal Board Bylaw. So from people into like lots of tiny words.
Good evening, Council. For this report, we are bringing forward the first draft of the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board bylaw for you to review before us to bring it forward to a future council meeting. So as per section 627 of the MGA, we are legislatively required to have a bylaw. Currently, we don't have one. It was previously established through the procedural bylaw, but there were changes in the MGA. I'm estimating around 2017, 2018, that now we have to have our own standalone bylaw. So this is the reason that this is coming forward to council. So within it, we talk about the membership and term, resignations, removals, remuneration, training, quorum, the chairs, panel requirements, virtual participation, the clerk's roles, appeal fees, and the board's functions and duties. We used the town of Canmore, Airdrie, Spruce Grove, Fort Sask, Leduc, and Okotoks to compare, looking at various sections. We have potential remuneration for you guys to consider underneath the financial implications. There are differences between Spruce, Fort Sask, Okotoks, Airdrie, which I'd be happy to answer. I based the current strategy that is in front of you based on Spruce and Fort Sask. Okotoks and Airdrie was a little more expensive, and I can give you the figures if you're interested in looking at that as well. While I'm looking for feedback for obviously the entire bylaw, one piece that I would like to get some specific feedback is section 13.2 of the bylaw, which is specifically the refunding of appeal fees, as everybody has a different tactic. So yeah, I'd like to, if we go through the five, Airdrie's is at the clerk's discretion, so very open-ended. Leduc's is only to appellants who actually aren't the applicant, but they were negatively affected by it. Okotoks is the same as their ARB, which is you get it if you win the appeal or if you withdraw. And then Fort Sask and Spruce Grove have no refunds whatsoever. So it's across the board, and this is one where I'd like council to give some sort of feedback. But outside of that, I'm open to any questions you have about the proposed bylaw in front of you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Reid, kick us off, please.
Yeah, good. I'll take a kick out of this to start. So the reference to just appeals fee is in section 12, right, not 13?
No, it would be the appeal fees, if we scroll down.
I thought you referenced 13, but I think it's 12. 12.2?
Oh, I might be looking at, yep, you are correct. I have the edited version in front of me, so that's my bad. Correct, sorry about that.
Yeah, so I'll come back to that. So the question about remuneration, I can understand that for taking in the training, but I don't understand it for hearings. If we have members of the community who are prepared to volunteer and do that for free, why does this set a precedent then for potentially other committees and other and then eliminating really the volunteer opportunities. Again, I understand it for training, but I don't necessarily appreciate it for hearings. Can you explain that a little further?
Through the chair to Councillor Reid. So this is going with the comparables. So every municipality that I've looked at has a remuneration for these type of hearings. They are, if you're going to compare it to, say, a committee for people to volunteer on, there's a lot more quote unquote stakes for these type of decisions, right? So these are people willing to make a hard decision on an appeal for a subdivision, which could be worth millions of dollars. So I think that's where people sitting on this board have a large impact, and it could have a very large impact on the community. So that's a personal opinion on why I think they should be paid. But then if you just look at every other municipality, they do pay for this sitting on these type of boards. So
yeah, again, my pushback would be that have we had problems finding volunteers, and have there been concerns about their decisions, and are there concerns about their quality? I know our particular board, or the Spiel board, may not meet that often, but I would think that we have qualified volunteers who are prepared to do that. I think I would assume that their decisions to date, while may not be tough ones yet, well, maybe one coming up, but not tough ones yet, that they could make the right decisions knowing that they were members of the community, and I think that there are good qualified volunteers out there. So I guess that would be, I'm not going to belabor the point, but that would be my pushback on that one. And then on the appeals, or the appealing fee in that 12.2. So again, you're probably just doing that because other communities are doing that, and you just think that's appropriate?
To Councillor Reid, this one is one where, so if we use the SDAB, which is a different piece, but we're going to talk about it right after, the MGA mandates when you need to refund for it. For the ARB, it doesn't. So it's purely from municipality to municipality on whether or not they do refunding and when. So the viewpoint that I've built into this is that you get a refund if you withdraw it, because that is a lot less of administrative burden to organize the meeting, host the meeting, help make the decision writing, versus if the meeting actually does happen, and even though you still win, there still should be a fee associated because of all of the time and effort that it took to host that meeting. Does that answer your question?
That makes sense to me, and I agree with you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Federico.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just curious, going back to what you said originally, did you say that the MGA requires certain requirements from 2017 to 2018? Is that what I'm understanding?
That's my guess from my research, looking at when the MGA might have changed. There was a lot of changes for SDAB in 2017. So that's where I'm estimating when this might have been the standalone bylaw piece for it, but I am not 100% on that.
If I might be able to jump in and just supplement Mr. Hawkins' information. The SDAB required this to be established by bylaw. The procedural bylaw already had established the SDAB board, and so we weren't required at that time to create a standalone bylaw. A lot of communities moved to that model, but because the council had already established the SDAB board within the procedural bylaw, that met the mandate of establishing the board itself. And so this would further just have it be the standalone, because there are a lot of rules that go with the quasi-judicial boards, both for SDAB and ARB, that are very unique to those boards. And so having the standalone bylaws allow us to have those provisions specifically within these two boards themselves that are very different than would apply to a standing committee for council.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just wondering as to why we were looking at it particularly now. Are we just analyzing boards, or is it something that's come forward from actual legislation that requires us to do it now? I'm just wondering about the timing.
No, this has been on Ledge Services plan for probably 3 years. It's just been a capacity issue to get this one in front of you. And the ARB bylaw was in desperate need of an update. And so both being the quasi-judicial boards, we determined that we would bring them forward together to also solidify those things about appeal withdrawals, how we are compensating our boards, because ARB has had compensation with it since it started. So from the inception of that board, there was compensation, understanding that those are impactful decisions appealed to the courts, and have set some precedent. So we did have that compensation factor in, but it was just timing to finally have Mr. Hawken on board and have the director level there that takes some of the pressure off and allows Mr. Hawken to focus on these two bylaws particularly.
Yeah, thanks for the information. I mean, I think it's super important. I mean, I see some of the policies that seem extremely outdated, and I think that that's not good. I mean, it's 2024, and we have to make sure that we're keeping up a policy, and whatever it takes to make us get there, that's what we need to be looking at. When it comes to the compensation piece, you know what, if other like communities are doing the same thing, sure, you can find good volunteers, but I don't think that's just what we should rely on and not compensate people for work. I mean, we need to be comparable to other like-sized communities, and I think we need to start taking those steps and not just rely on good-hearted people who are stepping up. I mean, yes, there's lots of great volunteers here in town, but let's keep up to date with what everybody else is doing out there.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Fedeko. Councillor Nagel.
I was just curious about the compensation structure, why it would be in blocks for 4-hour meetings, 4 to 8 hours, and then the over 8 hours, as opposed to just a flat hourly rate for the non-council members.
Through the chair to Councillor Nagel, you can. It's completely up to council. The reason it's laid out like this is the most common practice based on the comparable municipalities that we looked at. The only one out of the 5 that didn't do it this way was Leduc, and they just had a flat rate for the day. But you would have, council does have the ability, if you want to do a per hour rate as well, that's totally up to your prerogative.
Okay, yeah, if there's no like strong logical argument for why we would do it in blocks, I think like following standard Alberta labor law practices would make sense, like, which I think is a minimum of 3 hours for somebody who shows up to work. It's been a long time since I've been an hourly employee, so I forget. I think it's minimum of 3 hours and then just an additional hour of compensation thereafter. It seems logical to me, but yeah. Anyways, thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Flowers.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. Do I understand that we haven't paid anything to date for remuneration?
That is correct.
So it does make sense to me with these complex issues that there would be some funding. I'm not stuck on how it would work, but I do agree that we should have a rate to pay. And how many hearings would we have in a year typically?
Through the chair to Councillor Flowers, 2021 we had 5 hearings, 2022 we had 9 hearings, 2023 we had 1 hearing.
Some of them are probably simple and some are very complex.
That's a fair point.
And I'm all in favor of providing compensation.
All right, thank you.
Again, just to supplement, Mr. Hawken, after the land use bylaw passed by council in 2022, some of the consistent pieces that we were hearing through the SDAB were resolved through changes to the land use bylaw itself, which decreased the number of hearings that administration was processing.
Thank you. Mayor Jung.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. That was good work. Work well done. Mr. Hawken, thank you for the bylaw. I'm generally in favor of it. The 2 points in which I would comment on as far as the appeals and what is it, 12, section 12. I would like to see that open to the clerk. I just think that's an easier way to go. I mean, you asked us the question, that's my answer, is open to clerk. I think the clerk would have way more context into which the appeal or the refund would be situated in, so I think that's best left there. I'm in favor too of the remuneration. I don't mind Councillor Nagel's suggestion, but I think it should just be simple. I think most of these are of a short nature, but when they get lengthy, but your suggestion identifies or acknowledges that. So there is, I guess, one question. There is an increased amount of training for the Subdivision and Appeal Board that those members have to go through. Is that correct?
Yes, through the chair to Mayor Janung. It was, in 2024, it spread over 4 days in 4-hour increments.
Yeah, so it's a lengthy investment of time, not saying that other committees don't have an investment of time. But there's, for all the outlines, or all the points that you've outlined already, I agree with the remuneration, and I think we should just make it in line with like communities. We already have our compensation review of like-sized communities. I think we just use the same parameters and go from there. So, thank you.
Okay, I have a couple questions, then I'll wait in. I saw there was can you just speak to the virtual attendance? The idea is to allow both the members of the board as well as participants to appear virtually and participate virtually, is that correct?
Through the chair to Deputy Mayor McFadden, that is correct, with the caveat that everyone can see and talk and work with everyone. So the reason we wrote it the way we did is because right now, if we were to do it in chambers, we actually wouldn't be able to fulfill this. However, with possible renovations, we might be, or we should be if it goes forward, but we don't want to run into the problem that we currently have in these chambers, where if it's going to be live streamed, or if people are coming in virtually, but they can't see the board, or the board can't see them, it just doesn't, it's not efficient. It isn't good for making solid meetings. So we wanted to include it because that's the way of the world. COVID changed a lot of things. However, we're realistic in the fact that we want the board meeting to be efficient and get the best outcome possible. So you need to have the technology that can allow for that to happen.
Okay, yeah, and that was going to be my follow-up question about whether we had the capacity at this point. But what I'm hearing from you is with the investment council is directed towards council chambers, we should be able to have that capacity next year. Is that the idea?
If the renovations were to move forward, we should have the capacity, yes.
Okay. And then, what's my next question? Sorry, so just on your questions there, on the remuneration, I have to admit I got a little bit confused. Have we currently been providing remuneration for the members or not?
No.
Okay. That's great. So when we're looking at that, I do support that. Those individuals are serving in a semi-judicial body. Their decisions carry a lot of weight, and we are requesting them, to provide that, have that training and to participate that. So I certainly support that. When it comes to how we remunerate them, I'm rather ambivalent about whether it's per hour or blocks. I know that I think it's blocks for the Rocky View Foundation. They just get a set amount. That's correct. And then in working with Alberta municipalities, that remuneration is for blocks as well. So my lens on that is just kind of let's stay standard. So if that's what the majority of the group is doing, let's just keep it consistent, would be my take on that. And then with the question around who can determine a refund on appeals, I'm in line with the mayor in giving that authority to the clerk as well. So I think those are kind of the questions you'd identified, and those are my takes on those. Councillor Fedeko, you had more questions?
Yeah, I guess building kind of on your question about the virtual attendance, I imagine that if the upgrades are all finished and done and everything comes together, I imagine that would include all of council committees, including council themselves, would have a virtual attendance perspective to do modifications. If we're going to be able to apply for one, I would imagine it's for all.
I can provide some comments to that through the chair. Actually, if Bill 20 does go forward in the way that it's currently written, there will be a requirement for us to have that capability. So that is something that we are actively investigating at this time as far as what the upgrades are going to require, given that at the time that the capital budget was brought forward, that was not necessarily the priority, but it is something that we are actively investigating at this time.
And I'd like to just supplement that. Right now, as the bylaw is written, this board could be done as long as every attendee is virtual. So even as written, for this particular board, we could do a fully virtual meeting without anybody in council chambers, and then just have the streaming go out so that there is the ability for the public to watch the hearing. So it still could be implemented as it's written prior to those upgrades. Once we have the upgrades, then we can do the hybrid version.
Thank you for that. Yeah, seeing no further questions, I believe that's a wrap on item 5A. I believe you are with us for item 5B.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So Bylaw 2024 is a review of our current Assessment Review Board bylaw. The last time we did this was in 2016, so it was in well need of a tune-up. So the changes that we brought forward is adding a few more definitions just to make things clearer and easier. We updated the membership and term. We added the resignation and removal section, added a remuneration section, kept it the same as the SDAB bylaw to ensure consistency, updated the fee filing section, and then added a withdrawing a complaint and the virtual participation in hearing section. We used, again, Canmore, Leduc, Airdrie, and then I also, since this report was made, looked at Fort Sask, Spruce Grove, and Okotoks as well, just to do some comparisons. So the, as stated, the remuneration is the same as the SDAB bylaw that we just talked about to maintain consistency between the boards. And I just wanted to be clear, there is a clerical error actually on our current bylaw for Schedule B. If we scroll through, there, I can do it, yeah. So on Schedule B, it currently says for residential, 4 or more dwellings is $250 per complaint, and non-res is $250 per complaint. This actually was changed in 2019. I found this very recently through the budget process. So I've actually updated this because it's just a clerical error. It was already approved by council in 2019, and it's been updated on our website. But the good news is that $600 per complaint is a lot closer to the comparables of the 5. They're all in the range of that 625, 650, 600. So not recommending any changes to that one at this time. The two pieces, just for clarity while we're on Schedule B, for council's knowledge, we had in 2021 one hearing. So the revenue generated was $600. In 2022, we had a combination of 6 residential hearings of 3 or less and 4 non-residentials that added to 2,700. And then in 2023, we had 2 meetings. One was residential, 3 or less, and 1 non-res. So that added up to $650. So as per the last presentation, I'm looking for any feedback, or if you're specifically looking at both the fee schedule remuneration, I would love to hear council's feedback. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Council, I think you can take silence as a good thing. I'm not taking any comments from my perspective on the remuneration, just to keep it in line with the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board would be my feedback on that. But yeah, it looks like we are good to go on this item, Mr. Hawkins, so thank you very much. Before we move on to 5C, Bylaw 19, let's take a 5-minute break if that's all right. no, we're live. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Next up, we're discussing Bylaw 19, 2024, Greystone Phase 10 Land Use Amendment, led by Ms. Joelle Anakarako, Planner 2. Over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Mayor, and members of Council. This evening, I am here to present Bylaw 19, 2024, which is a land use amendment in Greystone Phase 10. This application is for a land use bylaw amendment, which is highlighted on the hierarchy here. Land use amendments are informed by all of the policy documents above them, including area structure plans and neighborhood plans, and will go on to impact decisions at the subdivision, development permit, and building permit stages. Greystone Phase 10 is located at the north end of the community with lands adjacent to the Spray Lake Sawmill storage yard. This is the final phase in the neighborhood plan area to receive land use and will facilitate completion of the community when subdivision and development occurs. This is the land use map from the Greystone Area C neighborhood plan, which shows these lands as low density, mixed density, and park space. The land use amendment proposed through this application exactly follows the neighborhood plan, with low density provided to the north, mixed density for 2 blocks in the center, and 2 neighborhood parks in the plan area. This slide provides an overview of all of the allowable uses in each of the proposed districts. The low density district is intended for single detached housing with supporting residential uses. The residential mixed district allows for single detached, semi-detached, and multi-unit dwellings up to 8 units as a discretionary use. And the Parks and Recreation District is intended for park space with opportunities for some supporting discretionary uses. This application supports Council's strategic plan, the municipal development plan, and the sustainability plan, which states that everyone should have a roof over their head and that wherever you are close and connected. This application was circulated to internal departments and external agencies for comment, and no concerns were received. There were 2 notice of application signs posted to inform the surrounding communities of the proposal, and the application will also be subject to an upcoming public hearing. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to welcome any comments or questions.
Excellent. Thank you for your presentation. Council, questions? I'm not seeing any at this time. Do we have a timeline for the public hearing?
Through the chair, I believe it's being planned, so May 13th for first reading, where we will be proposing a public hearing for May 27th.
Okay, so prior to summer. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Your presentation was clearly well received.
Thank you.
Excellent. So we are now moving on from 5C to item 5D, which is the 2025-2027 budget draft principles and process, led by Executive Director Stacey Lowe.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Mayor, and Council. This evening I'm here to introduce the 2025 to 2027 budget principles and the draft process timeline. So traditionally, Council would not see these until later in the year. However, as part of our process improvements, administration has advanced this work earlier in support of internal business units and to drive more regular touch points with Council throughout the budget cycle. Based upon the work of the Budget Process Task Force and strategic sessions of Council, administration has prepared budget principles upon which the 2025 to 2027 budget will be developed. So those are implementing a fiscal framework with key objectives being the investment policy, a reserve fund management, and debt management policy. Building civic literacy with key objectives of more regular fiscal reporting, increased public interface, and the OKRs reporting that was discussed specifically at your strategic planning session. And then closing the infrastructure gap. This has been an ongoing conversation that we've been having throughout the last few years, obviously, with the growth that we've been experiencing. And key objectives would be revenue diversification and offsite levies update, asset management plan, and a functional 10-year capital plan, which was also discussed at length during your strategic session. So the timeline that was shared in your report, and that we'll highlight shortly, will be brought back to the May 27th regular council meeting for endorsement. By doing so, that will also confirm the dates that are scheduled for budget deliberations in November. As noted, administration has considered discussions and feedback from council throughout prior budget cycles, during strategic sessions, and as part of the budget process task force, while also giving consideration to our internal processes and efficiencies. So there are some minor process changes proposed. Of note, council will see that in October, administration is proposing to bring forward the rate-supported budget ahead of the tax-supported, with the hope that council could be in a position to approve this budget and the associated bylaws before the end of November and ahead of budget deliberations on the tax-supported budget. This process will ensure that the required amendments to utility bylaws are in place with enough time to have changes communicated out to the public and to have those adopted in time for January 1st implementation. Thus, this reduces the amount of internal finance adjustments and mitigating resident confusion. The schedule, as noted, maintains 4 days for deliberation in November with final review at the December 5th COW and adoption proposed for the only council meeting in December, which is scheduled for December the 9th. Should council not be comfortable as we go through the process with advancing deliberations and approval of the rate-supported budget, it will be addressed during the scheduled deliberations, as has been the case in prior years, and brought forward in December as well. So I just wanted to be clear that by approving the timeline when it comes forward to your next council meeting, that would not be committing to say that you are absolutely comfortable with that process, just simply that we would go through the timeline as proposed, and then when that budget is brought forward in October, council can decide to postpone deliberation and final adoption of that until the deliberations and the rest of the budget is approved. So with that, I would welcome any comments or questions council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Lowe. Councillor Federico.
For the update. I don't really have too many questions about the process that's being described here. It all looks fine to me in some ways. But I do have a couple of questions. So because I wasn't at a couple meetings, I'm just wondering if there are suggestions that we'd like to see maybe implemented in the upcoming budget for this year, what we're going to see. I mean, how do those come forward? Is it something that I just email in and somebody takes a look at? I just have a couple things that I would like to see included that probably weren't included in our last budget.
Through the chair to Councillor Federico, absolutely. As was offered to council post-budget process last year and then ahead of the budget process task force meetings, if there is feedback from council on what they appreciated in the budget process that we went through last year, or the document that we provided, which did have more information, we recognize there may still be information that council members would like to see, or maybe questions that could be answered in advance. Those suggestions can absolutely be submitted forward to myself, and we will review them. I do know that part of some of the updates that we are intending is that higher level of detail in that which Mr. Aleem presented to council recently, but if there are things outside of that that you would like to submit, please do so. You can send those directly to myself.
And I guess the only other question I have is the budget task force itself. I know that some upcoming meetings have been canceled. So when I look back at our procedure bylaw, like it actually states that the task force was to meet at least once per month. I'm just wondering, will there be a public vote to say that those meetings will not be occurring? What is the process when it comes to our procedure bylaw? Because it's actually written in there.
Yeah, so that's correct. So the budget process task force, I think, went through a little bit of a transition. Certainly when I joined the task force at the beginning of this year, we reset the expectation around what those meetings were going to look like. Despite the fact that the terms of reference says that a committee will meet at a certain amount of times, it is always up to the committee, specifically in this instance, this is a committee specifically just of council, to make the determination that those meetings aren't necessary. Council committees, any of your standing committees or those types of things can cancel meetings if there's nothing that is actively being discussed. At this point, when circulating the meeting request for the next upcoming meeting, it was determined by the majority that the request was that no further meetings would happen until post-budget process. That could change if administration is looking for specific feedback and thinks that there's value to pulling the budget process task force together. We would certainly reach out. But at this point, the committee itself does have the discretion to determine whether or not a meeting would be canceled.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I appreciate the fact that it's majority vote. I like it to state that I was not in favor of that vote to not meet, just so it's on public record.
Great, thank you, Councillor Fedeko. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I was in support of the document you presented, and in particular, like the second page that talks about the change that would allow more regular touch points for council to be able to be involved in the proposed schedule. So I really appreciate that. Just picking up on Councillor Fedeko's question, how many touch points did council have in terms of being able to provide feedback to that the budget task force or the budget process? Just to curious, again, not to suggest that it would prohibit us from adding any additional ones, but just curious how many opportunities were there? Were there multiple opportunities for council members to participate in that?
Through the chair to Councillor, I do believe there was multiple requests for feedback, whether that was through the specifically for those members of the budget process task force. It certainly immediately after the budget process, we did request some feedback, and then that request was reiterated again this just before the budget process task force met this year, and then subsequent to that, I think there was one more opportunity. But absolutely, anytime members of council would like to provide feedback on a process that we're following, there's always opportunity to do so.
Okay. Great, and great. I love that. I love what you're doing with the schedule. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Mayor Janone.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a few pieces of feedback on the principles. First of all, I really align with where administration's landed on with this, specifically the OKRs. And I mean, they're all good, but the ones that jumped out at me were the revenue diversification and offsite levy review and update. I think we've had multiple conversations around the council bench about that. Glad to see it's a key objective, and the functional 10-year capital program. Looking forward to that work. And just around the significant shift, and I'm glad you highlighted it, in the rate support versus tax supported budgets. I like the idea of splitting those two. I think we did some de facto of that this past year, just all around the one rate. But it does make sense to me that we look at that in isolation, and then, so the way I understand it, and I thank you for clarifying that we can shift this once we're in it. But so first reading, so we'd see it, understand it, and then not vote on it until after we've seen the tax supported. Am I understanding that correctly?
That would be correct.
Okay, so one informs the other, and you're asking us to take a look at the rates before we look at the tax supported, so that we know how they would meld together before approving the overall budget.
Through the chair to Mayor Jung, somewhat, yes. It's also to allow the timing that's required for administration to present the draft budget to you and the reading of the rate bylaws. So we will be presenting it on the 7th, asking you to pass first reading of those rate bylaws on the 15th, and then not coming back for that approval until the 28th. And in the middle of there, you're also getting your tax supported draft, but it does allow, as well as you indicated, the opportunity for council to see what the revenue requirement impacts are going to be on the tax supported, as I know, and certainly administration considered the fact that oftentimes council wants to see what that cumulative impact is overall for the end user in our community. So we thought that would be, that would allow for the same amount of information to be provided to council ahead of adopting the rate supported, but of course you would not have deliberated the tax supported nor made any amendments to that at that time. So if council was not comfortable, certainly, as I said, that could be shifted into the November and December deliberation and adoption.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this change and this, I guess, attempt at trying to streamline or change things and trying to find a way that's just more efficient. And that was something I keyed on, was that your last comment was that this actually is a huge efficiency gain for staff, like administratively putting the whatever decision forward into the new utility rates in the following year. Like, that turnaround must be significant if we're doing that in December and then new rates come out in January. Is that
That is correct. There, through the chair to Mayor Jung, there is generally a delay that ends up happening, so there's a lot of adjustments that have to be done in the back.
So some red tape reduction.
Correct.
Love it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lowe, can I see the screen with the principals again? I love the schedule as well. Yeah, and so I'm really, well done. Really excited to see that we're going to start looking at the investment policy, that reserve fund management. It's been a gap that stressed me out recently, in the debt management policy. So I'm really looking forward to integrating those policies and lenses into our budget piece. And of course, as much of that civic literacy, budget related otherwise, we can do. I really appreciate. And then having that deliberate discussion around the infrastructure gap. So I certainly wanted to give kudos for these draft budget principles. I think it's a great forward step. So I want to recognize that and the details of the schedule as well. I did have a couple of questions, certainly when it came to the schedule and the public engagement piece. In previous years, I've provided feedback and analysis on the Leduc budget process, which does allow public members to ask a question in the budget kind of before the budget meetings begin. And so that means, I think Leduc at the time, I don't know if they're still doing it, actually had their budget meetings in the evening so that to allow the public to ask some questions that could be addressed at the time. So I'd like to see if the budget task force, or if we could have a look at expanding that. I thought it was a really forward-looking way of engaging the public, kind of when everything was coming together at the final days in the budget. And then if we're also looking at the timelines, for those of us that are balancing off full-time employment with this role, if we could look at either evenings or building in a Saturday there to support that balance that a lot of us are doing. So that's my thoughts on the schedule. I do have a couple of questions about how we're going to be building out the budget. And so one of my frustrations in last year's budget was that we didn't actually have actuals, previous year's actuals. And so I just wanted to get some confirmation or some clarity about whether the budget task force or the intent is that this upcoming budget will include actuals from previous years.
So I'm going by memory and I'm looking over to Mr. Aleem. I do believe that we did incorporate the variance between the two. I'm not certain that we will we be able to provide actuals at that time, Mr. Aleem? I don't know. Yeah, because we are deliberating ahead of the year being
we can. Sorry if I can jump in. I think we can from previous years. Obviously, the current year wouldn't be completed, but we can go back to the previous complete year and show actuals. I think that's what you're referring to, Councillor McFadden. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So
my apologies.
Yeah,
No
like a 2024 would be like year to date. 2023 would have the actual for that year, and the 2022, et cetera. So if that would provide me some comfort in being able to understand our spending trends across the different departments, and have those adjusted to reflect kind of organizational changes as well. We also talked about the importance of the census and in understanding our community, and I think it would be great to make sure that we're building in an understanding of the demographics into our budget process. And again, just if we are actually understanding how many seniors we have, we need to start forecasting their needs, how many youth we have, those type of things. And I don't know about the survey question. Next year we might need to include the number of dogs. We can forecast out the number of off-leash parks we need. But if we can start integrating the demographics so we can be deliberate in kind of forecasting needs would be great. And then, a final question. Did we, have we submitted the 2024 budget to the Finance Officers Association this year?
Yes, we have.
Excellent.
As of Monday.
As of Monday, thank you. Yeah, and I think great progress has been made here, and I really do appreciate that. So thank you for your presentation. Anyone else? Oh, Councillor Federico?
Yeah, in response to a couple other things that you had said, Councillor McFadden, so just so you know, like the budget task force, the meetings have been canceled due to meeting that mandate. So some of the suggestions you brought up, like there's no meetings on the docket as of right now, whether or not they come back, perhaps, but just when you said that a couple of the suggestions could go through the budget task force.
They'll have to find a different way? Okay.
Yeah.
If I could clarify, certainly administration is actioning the suggestions that came forward to the budget task force as we are able and as is appropriate. We are planning, you will see, we are coming forward again in June and July, so there will be opportunity for council to provide formal direction if that's a specific request of the majority of council, if there's something that you specifically are requiring. But obviously, we will take into consideration council's availability. We can't have deliberations without you. And so that's something that we will look at, where they can be accommodated, perhaps a blend of opportunities. Again, and then we are also in front of you again in July with the budget consideration. So there's certainly a number of opportunities between now and before we get into deliberations to have those options and the requests come forward.
Excellent. Yep, thank you very much. And I certainly appreciate the number of touch points that have been identified and the deliberateness of that. So thank you very much to the team for those improvements. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. One very small quibble question with the schedule proposed, which is the very first deliberation day, November 12th, it looks like there. Due to the Monday there, the 11th being Remembrance Day, it looks like we have a council meeting that night too. Does that mean deliberations all day and council meetings at night? Or?
That is correct.
Seems like a rough day to me. I might want to split that one up if the group agrees, but otherwise I had no issues with the schedule. That was my only takeaway as I look through it here. If others disagree with me, I'm happy to do a full day of council.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay, no, it looks like we're good. Ms. Lowe, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And then, so with our updated agenda, item 5E is being postponed to the next committee of the whole. So we are now on to item 5F, which is Envision Cochrane 2050 policy goal discussion.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Mayor, and members of Council. Thank you for having myself and Envision Cochrane 2050 team here tonight to present policy goal scenarios for the areas of parks, recreation and open spaces, arts and culture, and economic vitality. Before I hand it over to our consultants from O2 to walk you through our presentation, I want to take a moment and introduce our newest member of Community Growth and Envision Cochrane 2050's new team member, Rob O'Clair. Rob is a new new manager of planning services and is project sponsor in that role for Envision Cochrane 2050. A local Cochraneite who has called Cochrane home for almost 20 years, Rob brings nearly 15 years of public sector experience at the City of Calgary, where he spent time in planning and development, as well as real estate and development services. Starting his career at the front counter in planning and working his way up to executive advisor to the director of real estate and development services, and ultimately leader of land inventory and circulations. Rob is an avid runner, recreational baseball player, and father of two, who has a passion for public service and is excited about this opportunity to serve the community he fell in love with years ago and is proud to call home. So, Rob O'Clair, our new manager of planning services.
Welcome.
Before I hand it over to Rachel Dillon and Sean Small from O2, who will walk us through the policy goal scenarios, the Envision Cochrane team is prepared for 3 areas I highlighted earlier. I just wanted to set the stage for council and remind you that the purpose of this presentation is to introduce these scenarios for your information. While we're always happy to answer any questions that you have, the purpose of this presentation is to introduce you to the scenarios and give you some time to think on them before we return next week for a more fulsome discussion. As with the first round of policy goal scenarios, we will not be asking you to vote on each scenario, but rather provide your feedback to inform policy sections in the draft Envision Cochrane 2050 Municipal Development Plan, which will be the basis for our third and final round of engagement. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to our consultants, Rachel Dillon and Sean Small, to walk you through some of the policy goal scenarios that we prepared for you. Rachel?
Thank you.
Thank
Welcome.
you, Mark. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and walk through 3 scenarios with you. I'll provide a very quick refresh on the timetable of the project so far and our council meeting history, and then we'll dive right into it with the 3 topics that Mark mentioned: arts and culture, parks and recreation, and economic development. So you've seen this slide a few times at a few presentations, that the Envision Cochrane 2050 project is really taking in a lot of the good work that has been done through various studies and projects so far. And through a 3-phase public engagement process, we're talking to the public about vision and values. Phase 2 is about priorities and direction. And like Mark mentioned, phase 3 will be presenting the draft plan to the public. After each public engagement, we discussed the results with administration and and determined their needs and looked at everything in light of that, and then of course came back to you to discuss what we found through those discussions with the public and administration. With the Envision Cochrane 2050 plan, that then goes to inform more subject-specific plans that really determine how we will implement that document, whether it's transportation or servicing or parks and recreation. So as you'll remember, at the end of last year, we came with our part 1 of the scenario presentation, where we discussed mobility, land use growth, and housing scenarios. And we had a really great discussion there, and your feedback was really instrumental in crafting the engagement in phase 2, and then in turn, the draft direction of the plan. And we're here tonight to talk about the arts and culture, parks and rec, and economic development scenarios. Like Mark Kay mentioned, we're introducing them to you tonight, and then you could think about it for a week, and next week we can come back and chat about your thoughts on each of those. So I won't go over all the details, but we have been to council several times to talk to you about the project, what we heard in the engagement, about different policy scenarios. And most recently, we were here April 13th to talk about the what we heard findings from the second phase of engagement. So tonight, like I mentioned, I will present the arts and culture scenario, and then my colleague Sean from O2 will present parks and recreation and economic vitality. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have as a result of that. And like I mentioned, you'll have a week to think about them, and then we'll discuss them further next week. So here we are right in the midst of drafting the plan, and once we discuss these next 3 topics, we'll be able to complete the first draft of the plan. That will go to the public for feedback July and August. Afterwards, we'll finalize the document, make any final revisions before moving through the approval process. And with that, I'll dive into the first scenario, which will begin with arts and culture. Like before, if you'll remember, to the end of last year, we did a very preliminary rating on a triple bottom line framework, social, environmental, and economic considerations for each of the options. And then we also align them with what we heard in phase 1 and 2 engagement, so you'll have an understanding of how well they align with what we discussed with the public. This is really a high-level assessment to help inform your discussion. So with arts and culture, going back to the strategic plan, there's a lot of really good content about supporting community events and really focusing on bringing people together, being invested in culture and placemaking, and facilitating those social networks, a sense of community, community spirit, and community vibrancy. What we heard from the public is definitely a strong majority of programming and event support. People love the local opportunities to gather, but we heard a bit more mixed results on some were saying we should use what we have when it comes to facilities and amenities before adding more, whereas others have a desire of new venues and spaces as well for further arts and culture. Current policy direction supports initiatives that make hosting events easier, and the funding is focused to nonprofits for free events. Current state, downtown is one of several social, cultural, and entertainment spaces in the community. Community groups can apply for an event, and then there's some existing event space stock that needs renovations or perhaps an update. So as we all know, the value arts and culture brings to our community, it really helps animate our spaces, builds local identity and pride of place, beautifies the community. It has a tourism lens to it, of course, draws talent to the community, provides locals with things to do within the community, and then it generates jobs and spending. It's really about that creative economy. So the 3 scenarios that we have here, each of the 3 topics we have tonight follow a similar rhythm, where the first scenario really focuses on building on what current practice is. The second one adds more ideas when it comes to strategies or partnerships or permission space. And then the third one is always the more investment intensive scenario. So just to provide a bit of a framework as we go through these. So scenario 1 focuses on supporting community-driven events and maintaining the current assets, like the ranch house, including any needed life cycle renovations as they're required, and then continue to encourage events through process improvement, space availability, and reasonable fees. From a triple bottom line perspective, this of course would be the lowest cost option, but of course there's still life cycle investments that would need to be taken into account. And it would maintain the status quo for arts and culture service provision and assets. It's about a 2 out of 3 of what we heard. You'll see all of these are rated 2 out of 3 since we had mixed opinions in the what we heard for this topic. The second scenario is partner with local organizations and improve venues. So really focusing on partnerships and the different organizations within the community that work in the arts and culture sphere, increasing public art investment, looking for opportunities to increase granting to help support groups, events, and really grow that local arts and culture scene, and explore upgrades to assets. This is about a 2 out of 3. It really picks up on more of that social benefit by local focus to accommodate a growing arts and culture needs, maximizing the existing assets, really supporting partners and that ecosystem, and it has a bit of a moderate cost for that one. And then the last one is everything in scenario 1 and 2, plus setting the stage to really grow the arts and culture scene here, explore town-driven events, investigate the potential for a multi-purpose venue, potentially performance, gallery, rehearsal, conference, event center, other community spaces. And this is a real opportunity to link a strong arts and culture brand identity with tourism, promoting Cochrane's unique arts and culture scene. This has the greatest economic development potential, particularly for the tourism and creative sectors. It does come with the highest cost, of course, and it meets demand for a tailored local venue to accommodate a growing arts and culture scene. So for May 13th, in our discussion next week, we're really interested in what your arts and culture policy goal is. Is it supporting community-driven events and maintaining the current assets, partnering with local organizations and improving venues, and setting the stage for growing arts and culture? And with that, I'll pass you over to my colleague Sean to go through Parks and Recreation.
Thank you. So this here's the summary of the strategic plan components related to Parks and Recreation. I'm not going to go through them all. Certainly, Cochrane values the parks and green spaces that it has currently. What we heard was increased space and programming from residents, desire for more amenities, pathways, and sporting facilities, as well as though balancing that with protecting the natural environment and naturalizing area when possible. The town's current policy direction is maintaining or increasing those natural areas and habitats and protecting them or incorporating them into the communities, designating Big Hill as a natural environment park, and maintaining access and recreational use of the lands adjacent to the Bow River. And definitely one of the items, the SLS Center is very popular in town, increasing demand for recreational centers and park space as the town grows. People are definitely drawn to Cochrane for its access to natural spaces and the value that they provide to the community's identity, as well as plans for increased outdoor recreation space north of Heritage Hills, currently in the works. Considerations for Parks and Recreation are tied to community identity, ecosystem services, so having that balance of green spaces provide environmental function as well as recreational and passive function, well-loved natural parks and recreation spaces, accommodating a growing demand, not just for existing activities, but new trends and activities. Parks and green spaces provide community health benefits, and then again, there's a tourism potential for recreation services. The 3 scenarios here is the first one, maintain the current approach to parks spaces. So basically following the status quo as far as the existing process in which parks and open spaces are dedicated, and then how those spaces are then go through with determining programming. That is from a triple bottom line. This is definitely the lowest cost scenario. It maintains the existing system. However, it is not always forward-looking necessarily in addressing future growth. And so That's why it's rated as a 1 out of 3. And then from a what we heard perspective, a 1 out of 3 as well, primarily because of that it's not always forward-looking. Scenario 2 is improving existing parks and providing a greater park direction for communities. And so this is looking forward at investment in increasing parks functionality. And so that could be making them more adaptable as you move forward in the future so they can transition easily. Having new communities locating parks centrally, as well as supporting greater linear connections throughout Cochrane. This one here, from a triple bottom line, we ranked it as a 2.5 out of 3. Because again, this is driving towards making those improvements and looking forward to the existing parks and recreation system, as well as having investment not only in just the active parks and recreation, but also in how the naturalized and open space system can tie into that active system. And this one has a relatively moderate cost. Again, those investments will occur over the years, and therefore it's not a significant investment at this particular time. From a what we heard perspective, that's rated as a 2 out of 3. Scenario 3 here is building upon scenario 2, however, having that landmark park or recreation space so that everyone in the region here will know that, hey, I know that park in Cochrane. I've either been there or I know how great it is because I hear about it from different people. And so that's proactively investing in new spaces, exploring those opportunities for new regional or landmark parks and recreation space as the community grows, as well as establishing a funding mechanism to acquire new lands for making those natural connections. And mentioned here, conservation reserve is just one of those tools that may be possible. From a triple bottom line perspective, this one here, we rated as a 2 out of 3. This one here, population growth certainly increases demand for parks and recreation. So it's forward looking in that sense. However, once you start to plan out a landmark space or a destination space, definitely that comes with more operating cost and maintenance over time. However, there is the potential to draw major events or visitors through either recreation tournaments or just through passive or active use. And then conservation reserve, if it is a tool that the town wishes to use, does require funding to then implement that tool. From what we heard, certainly given that everyone loves parks and recreation, the more the better in people's minds, and so this one is a 3 out of 3. And so for next week, building on the arts and culture piece, the question is, what is your parks and recreation policy goal? Is it maintaining the current approach to parks and recreation spaces, improving upon and being more forward-looking, providing greater park direction for new communities and for intensification? And then the third option is in making more significant investment into more destination or landmark parks and recreation spaces. Now I'll go through the economic vitality options and scenarios. Similar here on this slide is, again, those comments related to the strategic plan, tying back to where the town's focus is for economic vitality. What we've heard through engagement is protecting the historic downtown is certainly a priority for many. Having some downtown public realm investment and protecting and increasing local businesses. The current policy direction for the town right now is definitely supporting business expansion and economic diversity within the downtown, creating that downtown storefront improvement program, maintaining business retention programs, enhancing the historic downtown within Cochrane, and creating that local commercial development, ensuring that there's a space for both the new commercial types of development as well as maintaining the existing commercial development within the town. The current state is definitely, the town already has some innovation and incubator support. We have support from the Chamber of Commerce, Innovate Cochrane, the Rotary Group, and Unbounded Thinking, as well as Tourism Cochrane plays a significant role into these policies as well. Considerations for the economic vitality policies are, again, tourism is one of the big components. Having a high quality of life attracts talent, investment for businesses. A range of commercial spaces will support local businesses, and so having a variety of commercial types as well as commercial size, streamlining processes and regulation, and so making sure that those processes that businesses have to go through, it's clear and simple. Providing sector needs, and so definitely that's one of the things we talked about at the end of last year when we were talking about the land use pattern, is different sectors moving forward, and then protecting commercial and industrial space within the town. So scenario one here is to support the economic development team and their strategy, advocacy, and the incubator space. And so that's by maintaining the existing programs and supports for local businesses right now, advocating for railway and regional mobility connections to stop in the town, investigating further red tape reduction possibilities, as well as collaboration on regional employment land. From a triple bottom line perspective, we rank this as a 2 out of 3. Cochrane already has economic development strategy, as well as already puts resources towards ensuring economic vitality in the town. And therefore, this would be the lowest cost because you're already doing that. You've already made these investments, and focusing on incentives and red tape reduction. From a what we heard perspective, this we've ranked as a 2 out of 3. Scenario 2 builds on scenario 1. However, this one looks at increasing land use permission space for sector-specific strategies. And so this is looking at if you want to target a particular sector, then exploring broader land use flexibility that may be able to accommodate those sectors quickly. Requiring commercial spaces in new developments of a certain size. And so again, looking at allowing that mix of uses to allow more businesses, targeting the attraction of industries with sector-specific strategies. And so whether that is tourism, technology, or post-secondary as examples, exploring promotion opportunities to further incentivize those reasons why to shop local within the town. From a triple bottom line, this one we ranked as 2.5 out of 3. This one here is focusing on expanding the range of commercial opportunities within Cochrane. Looking at resourcing, additional resourcing is probably required to take a more proactive approach, as well as then looking at more collaboration is required to make these opportunities exist as well. From what we heard, 2 out of 3 is what we ranked this one. Scenario 3 is, again, building on 1 and 2 already, and then taking an even greater proactive role in filling the gaps and looking at increasing employment lands and investment improvements within the town. And so this is having the town take a greater, more active lead as being either leading the charge or partnering as far as acquiring and developing more industrial or employment lands to the town. Looking at as well maybe creating a downtown public realm investment program, so that way driving public improvements more proactively, as well as then looking at talent and attraction investments on quality of life amenities. And so this again ties back to the other components that we've talked to you about, such as mobility or the parks and recreation pieces. The triple bottom line ranked as a 2 out of 3, as this is now starting to maximize support for economic development by being very proactive. Obviously, this comes with a higher cost on doing so. And then you do have those links though with quality of life investments, which then do have spin-offs throughout the town as well. From what we heard standpoint, this one has been ranked as a 3 out of 3. And so to summarize for next Monday, the question on what is your preferred economic vitality policy goal, the 3 options being supporting the economic development team and their strategies, advocacy and incubator space that the town has, building upon that one with increasing the land use permission space and sector specific strategies, and then building even further upon that one and taking a much more proactive role in filling the gaps in increasing employment lands and investing more in improvements within the town to draw those businesses and talent to the town. And so as we go through, we're leaving you with these 3. So the arts and culture policy scenarios, the parks and recreation policy scenarios, and then the economic vitality scenarios, where we'll return next Monday to hear your feedback on these programs. And thank you, and we're happy to take any questions you may have for clarification at this time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. You know, for all levels of government are struggling, I think, with public engagement, and I think I've said for quite some time that I love the fact that we're getting involved in doing surveys and that type of public engagement, and you know, in many ways, it's council's commitment to those intentional relationships, and as described in another report, it says, you know, relationships require intentional connection, honest dialogue, thorough public engagement, community events, two-way communications, and active community participation, and I think this goes a long way to doing that. And what I most appreciate about it is that we're actually getting factual sample representation of what our community really wants and needs, and then formulating appropriate policy and making then subsequently, I guess, budget decisions around that. So I love how this takes us down that road, and goes a long way to being able to address the concerns I've had in the past about public engagement. The question I had was the 3 options that you've presented, they're not necessarily in order of 1, 2, and 3, right? I understand it to be just representative areas. And in doing so, in the world of good, better, best, I think I've come to appreciate, although I'll need more time to consider it all in preparation for our meeting in May, later in May, it's just how you prioritize those, and then what the implications are as it relates to the budget. And so maybe that's, for me, the kind of cat and mouse that I'm trying to get organized my own mind about, well, we support this, but what can we really afford, right, in terms of being able to move forward. And again, as you suggested earlier, it might be a multi-year kind of approach, but maybe that's more of a comment than a question. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Council, I'm not seeing anything just yet, but I did, for my own, I just want to share a couple thoughts. I really did like when we were looking at kind of the land base and the idea of like coming up with a way to, is it conservatory lands or conservation lands, to try to find those different tools. I think that's a really great idea. There's a lot of spaces around Cochrane that people, you know, really value and consider as part of their home, whether we own it as a municipality or not. And then also really appreciated the lens that if we were looking to address the need for industrial land use, that it's probably going to have to be the municipality leaning in and leading that space. So I really appreciated that lens. And of course, you know, Parks and Recreation is a passion of mine. So I'm like the 3-3 all the way, because we need, you know, all of those things. And then when it came to the arts and culture piece, I mean, certainly through this term, council was given clear direction by the electorate. We want you to address traffic. And so I really feel that council followed those marching orders, and we've taken great steps in addressing our transportation needs. But it's now time to put that much intense energy towards balancing off our community with these other lenses, is my take on those, and certainly having the library presentation. And I think they're really representative of a gap we need to be deliberate in filling and be intentional, to use the word that Councillor Reid picked up on. I guess perhaps my only question and an area that I'm a little bit concerned around, I know in our planning documents, we've said that the Western Heritage, we really want to focus into the downtown. And I think I'm regretting that decision, in that I would really like to see the Western Heritage be in more of our commercial areas to kind of keep that sense of place. I'm not too sure if you heard anything about the sense of place piece or the Western design, or any feedback you kind of had around that lens.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely did come up in the public conversations about how people feel about the Western look and feel. And I'm sure, as you could imagine and appreciate, we heard a range of feedback about that. Generally, the largest proportion of people really do appreciate it in the downtown and like that downtown has that distinct identity. And then there's a mix of opinions as it extends beyond the downtown. If we continue that look and feel, there is definitely a significant proportion of people that do think that that's of value, whereas there is a slightly smaller proportion that are like, well, maybe contemporary is okay as we move further out. So I think there is some divergence in the public conversation about it, and it's definitely something that we can talk about in a municipal development plan at a high level about what we value when it comes to the look and feel of a community.
Yeah, that will be an area that I'll want to have a bit of a conversation about, because I'm not content that we landed that one. To really find a way to ensure that Cochrane maintains that unique sense of place. I don't want our 7-Elevens to look like everybody else's 7-Elevens. It's kind of where I'm coming through on that one. And then on the public engagement side, I mean, we've taken great strides in improving that. In this round, did you share the numbers and I just missed it? How many folks participated in this round?
I didn't share it in this presentation, but it was in a preceding one. So we had, in phase 1, about 600 participants and 400 in phase 2. So 1,000 submissions, knowing that some people probably participated in both, but 1,000.
Excellent, that's great news. And I know you presented and engaged with the Parks and Recreation Committee as well. And I've heard great things from that group in being able to have that opportunity to, engage and then share their thoughts individually. So thank you for your work there. Council, any other further questions on that? No? Okay, looks like we're good. So thank you very much for your presentation tonight. And I guess we'll see you in a few weeks.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so that wraps up item 5F. We're now moving on to the last page of the agenda, which gives me some hope. We can have item 5G, Whistleblower Program and Policy. Ms. Stacey Lowe, our Executive Director of Corporate Services.
Good evening again, Deputy Mayor, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm here to garner your feedback with respect to the notice of motion and the research that we've done since then, and the debate that occurred on January 8th regarding the whistleblower program and policy. So for Council's recollection, the Council resolved as part of the notice of motion that was brought forward to direct administration to investigate the process of establishing the third-party whistleblower program and policy. And that policy would be drafted and brought back by or before June 30th. So the intent of this presentation is to garner feedback with respect to, as I said, the research that's been done to date and what Council would like to see going forward. The feedback will ensure that our resources are directed towards the policy creation that aligns with the desired outcomes of Council through a mutual understanding of what specific challenge we're wanting to overcome or gap that we're needing to be filled. So concepts that were specifically noted in the debate and deliberation around the notice of motion included things such as the policy should identify conduct that's not permitted, should outline reporting processes, confidentiality, prompt investigation timelines, updating the code of conduct for both council and employees, and provincial programs, legislation, and authorities that may already apply, and the difference between their application and the application of a municipal whistleblower program. So as council would be aware, the report contained a lot of information, and so because of that, I'm not going to go into great depth or detail into the research that was provided. However, sorry, I lost my spot there. So I'm not going into great detail, including references to how the program works in other jurisdictions, though of course I do have that information, and I am certainly available to answer questions, or the applicable programs and policies and legislation that apply. Those were outlined in great detail in your package with respect to the ones that would apply in the absence of a policy. However, one piece I did want to provide, which is also in the report, is just a very high-level comparison of just a few communities. And this is a high-level comparison of a few communities on just a few simple aspects of the policy. And you can see the variety of application and applicability of these programs with respect to whether or not they apply to council, whether they apply to contractors, whether they're managed internally, whether they provide for public complaints. And really, I think at the driving these differences is what those specific communities may have been trying to solve, or what gap they were trying to fill by adopting their whistleblower program. So as you'd note, as pointed out on the previous slide, there are differences as to how the program's managed with respect to internal or external resources. While it was noted during the discussion that there is a platform that would cost between $6,000 and $8,000 annually, it should be noted that that would only be the portal for complaints to be submitted. That cost would not include triaging or investigation of those complaints. So there would be additional costs associated with that process, whether they were managed internally or externally. Therefore, that's why this feedback is going to be important for administration to move forward with any policy creation that is required, as well as future budget considerations. So specifically for this evening, administration is looking for feedback with respect to the following. Again, the need for a standalone whistleblower policy that would depend on what gap we're trying to fill or what problem we're trying to solve. The scope of the program, meaning will it apply to council, will it apply to staff, will it apply to contractors? The inclusion for the ability for citizen complaints and allegations. While some do allow for that, in my conversations with some of those locations, specifically the City of Calgary did note that those can be challenging at times. This was particularly noted in your report, so I won't go on about that. And then obviously, as I noted, what council's preference would be on investigative processes. Based on this feedback, administration will prepare the policy reflective for that for your future consideration. Therefore, at this time, I would welcome your comments and feedback on the matters noted.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ms. Lowe. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all your work on this and all the research. There's a lot there to consider. What I was trying to understand was, from your report, was does Cochrane really actually need a whistleblower policy, given all the other policies and legislation that currently exist for staff and all those other people? I'm just trying to figure out, do we actually need it? I guess to your first point, I mean, is your research experience and professionalism suggesting that we don't need it because we're covered off in other ways? And then the second question I have is the one that I think you raised, probably more succinctly, is what are we seeking to solve, or what is the why, I guess? And I don't know what your thoughts are on both of those questions.
So through the chair to Councillor Reid, I think ultimately that is the question. The second question you asked me actually is what the answer is to the first question. The why will determine fundamentally whether or not council believes that a standalone policy is necessary. Because of all of the other pieces of legislation that apply, the requirement for a code of conduct, bylaw, and then the other question being whether or not this would apply to council. So all of those things feed into whether or not there is a need for a standalone whistleblower policy with respect to what we're trying to solve and what the why is. If the goal for example, is that there's an opportunity for public to bring forward complaints about the conduct of council. Currently, your code of conduct does not provide for that specifically, but certainly a member of the public could approach a member of council or reach out to them and request that they do that. Or council could direct administration to amend your code of conduct policy or code of conduct bylaw, my apologies. So that's specifically the direction I'm trying to gather this evening, is what is the why, so that we can pare down some of these questions so that I can prepare a policy for your consideration if that's the direction council wishes to go. So I apologize, I know I answered your question with a question, but your question is the information I'm seeking this evening.
So perhaps if I may just add to that to supplement Ms. Lowe's comments is, of course, as directed by council, administration will take whatever action council directs us to, but this wouldn't be foremost in terms of administration's priority for things that I think would be adding the most value to the work we're currently doing.
Okay. So if I could just pursue it a little further. So I think when I think of a whistleblower policy, and I'm not against the concept, I'm just trying to figure out the why. So I hope some of my colleagues will respect that, right? I'm not saying no, I'm just trying to understand why, right? And so the why for me, when I think of a whistleblower policy, I think of a staff member or a member of the community who believes that something inappropriate, like illegal or something is going on, and has a venue to be able to do that. And so am I to understand that, at least for the staff side, there are venues for that? Someone could say, hey, so-and-so's done this, but I want my confidentiality to be supported. And they have a vehicle to do that right now?
Through the chair to Councillor Reid, that's correct. So any member of staff or, well, I'll focus on staff because that's specifically your question. Any member of staff can bring forward a concern or complaint at any time, whether or not they bring that forward to their manager or to their director or go straight to the Human Resources Department. That does happen and has happened, and we do conduct investigations. Sometimes those investigations are conducted internally. Depending on the complexity, we do consult with external resources or bring in external resources to conduct the investigation. So that does happen. There are avenues for that. Absolutely.
So part of the issue might be that the staff member doesn't feel comfortable going through the organization and wish to do it third party. So is that option available, or is that part of the whistleblower policy?
So that could be part of the whistleblower policy, that we don't necessarily have a strict or a formal program in place. So that's correct.
Okay, so some staff may be intimidated by the fact that they would have to go through the current structure as opposed to doing a third-party, nonpartisan.
Correct.
Okay, and then the other question I have, the other audience, I think, is then the public. Recognizing the number of, I don't want to say nuisance, but the number of freedom of information requests we've had over the last several years. In my personal opinion, I think that some of them are, we should be charging more money for those, because I think that they're more work than they are. There's no return on investment, and as it relates to the community or the town. So, but if a public member had identified, let's say, that some member of the town was doing something appropriate, and I'm not suggesting anybody is, but let's say whether they were stealing something or using something in an appropriate way that was not as per, there is no mechanism now for the public to do that?
There absolutely is, and it does happen. The public can submit a complaint, whether that's through the CAO's office, through the mayor's office, through any member of council. Yeah. It does occur, and we do investigate those as well. I want to correct something that I said earlier too. We have received anonymous staff complaints because of, just as you indicated, they didn't feel comfortable bringing it forward, and those have been investigated as well. Okay. So we don't simply just ignore them because they found a mechanism, whether by handwritten letter or whatever, to submit a complaint. That has happened, and they are investigated. No different than the public. The public can submit a complaint, and we do investigate those and have.
So the only thing that seems to be missing then, from my perspective, is a third-party thing. So is it possible to adapt current policies to be able to incorporate that, so that you don't have to create yet another policy that's duplicating what already exists?
Through the chair, respectfully, Councillor Reid, I do believe so. Depending on what and who we want the this type of thing to apply to, there would be the opportunity to make amendments to existing policy. It just depends on the breadth and scope of what the whistleblower or third-party process and who that would apply to, that we would want that to be considered for. But it is an option. Again, we would just have to establish a portal for those types of things to be submitted through, but the policy itself could be incorporated into already existing policies and directives that exist.
Okay, yeah, thank you, and my fellow councilors for the patience of trying to figure out the why. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fidego.
Thanks for all the information. There was a lot of information in your report, so I appreciate that you're not going to go through it all. It was interesting when I was kind of starting to go back and look through this, that I think it was back in 2019, maybe 2020, that there was actually a project that was done through the town, that actually one of the suggestions that came out of that project was actually for the town to create a whistleblower program. So I found that quite interesting. And also that there are some municipalities that have something that is not necessarily the four that you brought up there, with Buffalo, Grand Prairie, Medicine Hat, St. Albert. Medicine Hat, I think, is a proposal. So they have variations of whistleblower plans that I think, like you said, they all just kind of maybe take on a different form. Some include the public, some don't. Some are more about fraud and prevention. But honestly, with a growing community, this is only going to become something that I think we should be considering, no matter what. If it's not adopted right now, I don't think it should be pushed off on the back burner. One of our key pillars, and so going back to what Councillor Reid said of, the why, is that one of our key pillars is a health and safe work environment. And nothing speaks more than health and safety in my mind than offering people a safe place to be able to go, to take complaints to, without the fear of reprisal or anything happening to them. And whether or not we like to believe it does happen or it doesn't happen, I can tell you that in conversations with people who have approached me, that fear exists. This offers somebody a safe place to be able to go without that harm. And to me, when we talk about pillars and attracting people to come work for our organization, I can't think of anything better than to be able to offer that to people as a safeguard. When it comes to the standalone or the scope, I would take council out of it, and I don't know how much of council knows this, but I would love to support Rocky Mountain House in their idea of approaching actually the province through the AUMA by doing a resolution to develop a, I'm gonna find my notes here, like a provincial integrity commission that's going to take any code of conduct complaints and it removes it out of the hands of council members as well as administration, because number one, there's lots of information out there where councils have weaponized the code of conduct to punish a member of council, things get dragged on. This removes it completely out of council members' hands, and that goes to a separate third party, which I think is absolutely something we should support. Whether or not you want to remove the public from it, because I understand that probably bogs things down more in taking public complaints and where do they go. Maybe that for now could be something left off. But I absolutely 100% advocate to have a policy that protects staff as well as to protect council members, that it can go to somebody else. And in your case, you've mentioned this lots in your report, that a lot of times it goes to an auditor, which still works arm in arm somewhat with the town, but it's far away enough that it's not a member of actual administration. That would be something I would love to see. And I think, and the only other thing I'd like to see an updated policy on, I was kind of surprised to look at the employee code of conduct that stems back to 2008. It's a long time, it's pretty outdated. So those are things that I would like to see happen, and just my thoughts on it so far.
Through the chair, if I could, I just want to, I didn't mention it in the report, and I just, for council's information, in case you're curious, I did, these are the following policies and information that I researched and reviewed. So City of Calgary, City of Edmonton, those two I actually did have an interview with the City Auditor's Office of both of those locations. City of Red Deer, City of Grand Prairie, Town of Taber, City of Brandon, City of Nanaimo. I requested information and comments on implementation through the CAMA Masterminds Networking Group, Municipal Affairs Resources, GFOA website resources, and as well as some general online searches or research, which included the Transparency International website, which is a global coalition against corruption. The interesting thing, as you note, is that yes, the city auditor's office are at arm's length. They do not report to administration, they report directly to council. So the city auditors for both Edmonton and Calgary are very clear that that is why they receive the complaints in triage. But with respect to the City of Edmonton will only investigate fraud. Anything related to staff goes back to the HR department, as well as City of Calgary. It depends on the allegation, but it's about a half and half, a 50-50 split. The amount that the city auditor's office actually manage and investigate, and the ones that go back to the human resources department. So again, there is a bit of a split, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Mayor Chnung, please.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the report. As has been noted, lots in there. Appreciated all the in-depth discovery that you went through for this, and highlighting the list of all the resources that you tapped into. For me, and I actually, a lot of my remarks are going to echo, I think, what Councillor Reid was getting at, and what was highlighted by our CAO, that with all the priorities that we have identified, this is very low on my priority list. And I think that we should move on from it. Really, and I think what's outlined well in the report is that there are avenues, and I think this is what Councillor Reid was getting at too, that for council complaints, there is a code of conduct. I agree we need to update the code of conduct policy. And I'm interested in the AB Munis discussion, so I think that would be something we could park and wait for the outcome of that. As far as public complaints, municipal affairs, the privacy commissioner, the ombudsman, 3 different avenues there, staff, I think you've outlined well. There's the HR and then an investigation, and also the introduction of a third party, which does have that arm's length. So I think we have all of those avenues already, and I go back to what was highlighted in the report and what Councillor Reid was getting at, like what problem are we trying to solve? I don't see a large enough problem that this rises on the priority list for us. That is where really I'm going. Then the cost prohibitiveness of it, of the cost to monitor or set up the monitoring of it, or the implementation of it, and then $5,000 to $40,000 for complaint. I think we're opening a door that we start to lose control of a budget that could be, and I think you referenced it too, Councillor Reid, around the FOIPs, that essentially this could turn into a weapon and be weaponized, and we're on the other end of somebody's unhappy, and I think it was outlined in the Calgary example about, I just want to read that. Investigate, no, that's a different one. Sorry, I lost my spot there. No, these types of complaints can be challenging due to the emotions that can be involved. So that's exactly what I think we're trying to avoid here. I'd like to avoid. So all that being said, I don't believe we need a standalone policy. There may be a hybrid, but again, with all the priorities and all of the projects and all the things we're looking at, I don't feel this is something that needs to rise to the top. In fact, I would suggest, as we did with the city-town discussion that Councillor Flowers brought up, I'd like to see no further action after tonight on this, instead of sending us back on a goose chase of trying to come up with a policy. Again, I just go back to this is not a high priority, in my opinion. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Nagel, I was like all lost track of thinking things.
Okay, me. So if I heard you correctly, Stacy, if somebody in our staff has an issue with their manager or their manager's manager or HR, there is currently no third party for them to take that to.
Through the chair to Councillor Nagel, there is no formal representative that they could go to, but part of the benefit of the structure that we've created is the layer of directors. So while maybe they don't go to their own director, they can go to another director. or the members of executive leadership team. So they don't have to go to their executive director, they can go to another executive director. And obviously, if that was brought forward, then any one of us, as is our responsibility under our occupational health and safety legislation, we are required and bound by that legislation to provide a safe workplace. So if someone came forward with an allegation to me, whether or not they're in my department or they're in my division, or went to one of my directors, then the expectation is that that would be taken forward and investigated. Yeah, so there is an informal process, but there is no formal process for a staff member to click on an internal website and say, I would like to make an anonymous complaint because I think Carl in the sewing department is stealing thread. That was the most innocuous example I could come up with. That could not be linked to anybody. And so, no, we do not have that process specifically set up. But I cannot confidently say that we don't have it, because we do, and we have investigated those types of complaints that have come forward from members of staff about their own representatives of their own department.
And then am I understanding correctly that there is some service here in Alberta that we could subscribe to that would just take the load off of our staff, that as this third party, as long as it was paid for?
So through the chair to Councillor Nagle, all that service does is it creates the portal for intake. It does not actually triage the complaint. It does not investigate the complaint. It is just a intake system that allows for someone to input. The challenge, as I understand it, in speaking with both Edmonton and Calgary directly, one of the challenges with the anonymous complaint system is that if there is not enough information, you cannot go back. So you cannot. So there's limitations if there's anonymous. Now through a portal, there is a communication link set up that you can go back, because through a portal they don't have to give their name or their email address. But there are significant limitations with anonymity and the ability to investigate in the absence of fulsome information.
So that service, it's literally just like a technological piece of software or an app or an add-on or something? It's not actually a body of people that would do an investigation?
That's correct.
Oh, well, that doesn't seem very effective. I would like to see, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add, as I was thinking a little bit more about our current situation, I just wanted to note as well that for a good portion of our staff, they are also represented by unions as well, which is an absolute employee advocate group that they could bring forward any and all complaints that we dealt with. And so that's certainly a completely independent body that regularly forwards issues or concerns from our employees. So that doesn't cover all of our employees, but there is a significant portion of our employees that do have that independent third-party representation.
Thank you for that, Mr. Descartes. I did want to note too, we aren't sure about the applicability of something like this in that context. So you'll see that note in the report. For those employees that are covered by any form of collective bargaining agreement, we would have to think about how, and it's just a matter of entering into a letter of understanding potentially with those associations. If they have a standing collective bargaining agreement, there could be some limitations as to how investigations or the resulting processes would unfold for them if they are clearly laid out in their collective agreement. That's just a process piece.
Going back to this third-party app, where would that information go if we subscribe to that service?
So my understanding is the app itself sets up users, and so and reviewers. So there's a master reviewer, and there's differing layers, and then the complaint would come into the portal, and then it would go to those reviewers. So it would go to internal staff identified. Or if you've identified a third party, it would go directly to that third party to do the review and investigation.
Okay. So that is not a silver bullet solution like I was hoping it would be. I have a little bit of a different perspective than some of the other people who've spoken. I think that this is something worth exploring. You don't know if you have a lack of a whistleblower problem until you give people an avenue to actually blow the whistle. And I also fundamentally believe that when it comes to any level of corruption, you're much better off to try and prevent it than to try and deal with it after it's a problem. And so philosophically, this definitely checks out for me for a priority of something that I think would be a piece of good governance. I also, to be honest, find it a little strange that people push back against it. And the way I operate, when people push back against wanting to whistleblower a problem, that makes me think, or when people push back against opening up the venue to have whistleblowers have their voice heard, that makes me feel like we should push even harder to figure out why people don't want whistles to be blown. I'm hoping I'm not doing too many mental gymnastics and you understand what I'm saying. But it's just like, it seems weird to me not to want to increase transparency. I think it's a good idea. I also, of course, value efficiency. I don't know how we could do this efficiently. So I guess at this point, I'm an open mind to the idea. I need to hear more ideas on how we would actually do this, though. That's where I'm at.
Thank you. If I may, through the chair, Councillor Nagel, absolutely. I think what we're suggesting administratively is there's a balance between cost and value as well. There is a time question and an efficiency question. And one of the things that if we do pursue this further that we'll explore is there is downsides to anonymous complaint mechanisms. They can produce actually bad outcomes. They're not always a good thing. And so it's not a pushback on the idea of accountability or safety or creating the best possible workplace environment. It's a balance of all of those pieces, and certainly just want to share that general administrative perspective, that open to the ideas and concepts, but want to make sure we highlight both the cost and time investment and what the value return is. And at some point we have to make a choice as to where we set those thresholds. And I think that's ultimately the conversation.
Very good, Councillor Nagel? Please do.
It's not a direct response to your comments, Mr. Derricott. Actually, I just want to comment on the need of this, and it's something that happened years ago, so long ago that I think it doesn't impact anybody who's in the organization now, so I can share it. But there was a time when the Spray Lakes Rec Center upgrade was happening, and members of council were receiving anonymous emails from people, really strange stuff, like, oh, there's this huge problem you don't know about, I can't tell you anything because I'd lose my job, but you just need to go look around. And it was like a repeat occurrence that a few contractors who were working at the rec center were creating fake email addresses and contacting myself and possibly other members of council. So I do have for sure one example in time where something like this would have been useful, because I don't know who those people were, I don't know what happened to their concerns, but it is something that I have experienced as a councillor. So that's the last thing I want to add.
Thank you, Councillor Nagel. Councillor Flowers.
I too am trying to sort out how this could be helpful, because I am not clear. But how would it have helped in that situation if they're making up fake addresses? They couldn't have got to the bottom of it anyway.
No, I would have liked to have been able to respond to that email and be like, hey, if you have a serious concern about anything happening in your workplace, take it here, because I can't do much for my cell phone right now. But I didn't have any response for that person other than to call the person who is managing the construction of the pool and say, hey, you've got this problem, do something about it. But for all I know, the person that I'm leaning on for advice and expertise is actually the person who is the problem that the leak is about. And so if that scenario were to arise again, I don't have anything to do in response to a problem like that currently.
Okay, well, my concerns were too around the costs, and are we adding more red tape? When I look at the report, we already have all these integrity commissions and different avenues that we can lean on to, and we follow legislation and case law already. Are we adding more red tape and costs to the community that we are going to possibly get out of control with? I just don't see a straight solution to something that's really going to benefit us that we can get to easily. So I too would like to shelve it for now.
Okay. So sorry, just before we go into round two, I just want to share some of my own thoughts on this. Sorry, Councillor Wilson, you didn't get a chance.
Sure, I can go before you if you like.
Yes,
okay.
Please do.
I was just going to give my opinion that I voted to investigate this in the first place, just to get this exploratory report back. Thank you for it. After reading it, after listening to comments here, I'm not compelled that this is a priority activity. I'm not convinced that our current systems are inadequate. And as has been said many times, the costs greatly concern me, especially when we start including third parties to investigate and anonymous whistleblowing complaints. I think that can balloon out of control very quickly. So at this point, I would also support shelving it.
All right, thank you very much. So my thoughts are contrary to there. I'm always in favor of any method of increasing transparency. It's always a good thing. And for myself, like beyond the examples here, I know of numerous others, and I just really feel that a whistleblower policy is it's a standard tool of both good corporate governance as well as public governance. So I do support us continuing the investigation and trying to find a way forward with it. On the levels, applies to employees for sure. I think I do remember that time, Councillor Nagel, that ability to apply to contractors is good. I was going to have questions about how do you allow for the public complaints piece. Very intrigued by Rocky Mountain House's initiative on maybe creating a provincial level for that. And then we just don't have the capacity to go create our own integrity department. So it would have to be managed by a third party. So, and then on the other piece about whether to fold it or not, and I know we're still working through our procedural bylaw, but having had one of my own notice of motions kind of go through this piece where we kind of folded it at the committee of the whole, I've decided I'm not in favor of that process. I think any notice of motion that comes forward and that's voted on should be either you know, approved or defeated at the council chambers or at the council table during a council meeting. So being able to fold a notice of motion led by a councillor within the committee of the whole, I'm not in favor of. So that's outside of that context. So those are my thoughts at this point. Councillor Fideko, over to you.
Just one comment, and I think this is go back to what Councillor Nagel said. Before, you know, we consider just to fold something and just not look at it. So when I talk to the company who provides the actual, I'm talking the software, to Calgary and Edmonton, they were more than willing to come in and just have a conversation with council about what that actually looks like. And maybe that would be a very, very valuable piece, that it's not costing anything, it's not costing staff anything, it's honestly costing us time, so that we have a very clear understanding of what it actually is capable of, what it does, and how it could maybe solve some systems that aren't necessarily being discussed here tonight, and things that we don't know. Because we haven't implemented anything, that might be a good possibility. And that's not stating that we're using any particular company, it's just honestly gathering the information so that we can then make a decision based on fact and actually a system that's running. And just to keep in mind, this is not just newly adopted by Edmonton and Calgary. They've been using this for a number of years.
Right, thank you, Councillor Fideko. Mayor Janan.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Councillor Nagel about what you're hearing from me is not pushing back on the transparency or whistleblower policy. I feel like we already have the avenues in which people can go through. That's why I outlined the council staff and the public avenues that were outlined in the report. It's not that I don't believe in that. I already think we have that. And I think Councillor Wilson actually coined it very well about the return on the investment, and the avenues that already exist, I think, are already sufficient. And then on the notice of motion and whether or not we're fulfilling or not fulfilling, I just, notices of motion, administration go back and do the thing and come back, and it comes here. And then it's not that we're voting on it or not. I was saying no further action, which is nothing. I'm not suggesting it's just that's how that process unfolds. So it's not a vote or a not, it's just that we would just do nothing.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, for me, you know, my understanding is that the current processes and policies are transparent, and suggest otherwise. I'm not sure that I understand what the whistleblower policy would add to that doesn't already exist. Again, the one thing that I think there's some level of you know, for our staff about health and safety. I guess my only request would be at some point in the future that we would look at a third-party mechanism for our staff to be able to have an arm's length kind of representation in terms of being able to put forward, recognizing that it's only a percentage of our staff. But for me, this is not a high priority given in the last 18 months of what we've got to do together. And so, yeah, I just don't see the issue of transparency clearly enough to be able to warrant supporting this moving forward.
All right, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
One last final piece. Councillor Fideko just brought up that there is a company that might be willing to come and talk to us about what they do in this this area and might shed some more light. I'd be interested enough to hear what they had to say. I'm willing to donate my time to that. I just didn't think administrative time would be useful going forward. So I would be supportive of hearing from them if that ended up being something that we could do. All I was looking for this report was to find some possible low-hanging fruit, something we could implement that would help our current processes. I just didn't see that, and I'm not interested in going down an expensive rabbit hole going further. But Councillor Fadeko's one idea there. I would be in favor of hearing from that group or that company.
All right, thank you, Councillor Nagel.
So what do we need to do to get that group to come and speak here? If Councillor Fadeko is saying they're willing to come, do we need a motion to make that happen? I mean, a future meeting?
I would say, I think if we receive general direction from committee of the whole, we'd be happy to go away and make that happen. It seems, I don't know, you know, kind of the thumbs up, thumb down. We're still in the active process of reviewing this, and so that's a piece of council feedback that we're getting that would inform the next steps, I guess, is what I'm saying. So it wouldn't come in the form of a vote, just general direction from council that that's what you'd like to see as the next step of this process.
Okay. I also generally support Councillor Wilson's suggestion of supporting Councillor Fadeko's direction.
That's fabulous. Oh, so thumbs up over here. Yeah, and from, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just on that, recognizing timing, I just want to be clear, and at some point, it may have to come forward to a regular council meeting, that if we are going to, which is, we can certainly facilitate that, having the company come forward. It is highly likely we're not going to make the June 30th deadline for a policy to actually come forward, as was the formal notice of motion. So that may be something that you'll see come back to a regular council meeting in advance of that, just to say that we would be looking for an extension on that date.
All right, thank you, Councillor Fadeko. It's your motion.
Yeah, I would support that, rather than it being shut down without actually having all the information that I think council maybe needs to hear or could at least consider. Just collapsing it, not pursuing anything, I think is short-sighted on ourselves around this table, and at least give it the opportunity. I'd rather extend it out than do nothing.
It seems to be council's perspectives on that, and yes, for my part, I would like to hear from that company as well, and kind of, how do you say, see if there's some low-hanging fruit to make this work. So thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, that wraps up our regular scheduled program. So we get to move in camera for the next items. So I'm just going to ask for a motion to go in camera. Councillor Nagel, all in favor? That's, sorry, Councillor Fadeko?
Yeah, item 6C, I am voting against going in camera. This will be the 6th time I've been asked to recuse from a particular item on the agenda from administration. And like I've always stated before, I don't agree with being asked to recuse. But out of respect of the policy, or out of respect to my colleagues and of the procedure, I will recuse, but I'd like it noted in our minutes as well, please.
All right, and just administrate, that will be noted, that item, 60. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so sorry, the vote, again, I think it was passed 6-1. So thank you very much.